Chapter 1187. However, what Lin Sun didn't expect was that the opportunity to become a king didn't come, but the time to open the upper 9 realms came. On this day, in the 3,000 realms, the pavilion of the apex shone brilliantly, and the invisible power of rules and order spread out. In the pavilion of the apex, the Great Way ladder turned into a passage, leading to the deepest part of the universe. On this day, the 3,000 realms were shocked, and countless cultivators were excited. From the arrival of the absolute nightmare domain to the opening of the passage to the upper 9 realms, it had been exactly 1 year. Too many soul-stirring things had happened in this 1 year. Some people died. Some people became kings. Some people rose and obtained the fortune and opportunity they wanted. Some people, but from today onwards, everything would undergo earth-shattering changes. Those who ranked in the top 1,000 of the Pavilion of the Apex will go to the upper 9 realms to seize greater and more heaven-defying fortune. Others can only look at it and sigh. They don't have the chance to go there and can only wander in the 3,000 realms. The gap will be completely separated today. Many people were sighing with emotion. The upper 9 realms was a place of competition for the top figures, a battlefield for thousands of talents, and a stage for kings to compete for supremacy. Others were not qualified to enter at all. This was the gap. In other words, it was a kind of invisible elimination. What a pity. It was undoubtedly a heavy blow to some self-proclaimed geniuses and geniuses who couldn't get the qualification to enter the upper 9 realms. In the upper 9 realms, the competition for the heavenly golden list will appear. Doesn't this mean that we don't even have the qualification to compete? These strong people looked gloomy and felt frustrated. It was known to the world that only those who ranked in the heavenly golden list were qualified to be called real, heavenly talents. The difference of one step is like the difference between heaven and earth. The cruelty of the Great Way can be seen here. At this moment, in the 3,000 realms, there were countless sighs, melancholy, resentment, and helplessness. Some people even cried bitterly for this. It was difficult for non-real cultivators to understand the helplessness of not being able to see the peak of the realm. In contrast, those who were qualified to enter the upper 9 realms were full of ambition and excitement. The search for the Great Way was only for today. Let's go. In the golden underworld, Yun Qingbai was the first to enter the pavilion of the apex. Depart. Sister Zijin and Yin Zhanqiu's eyes flashed like lightning as they strode forward. The upper 9 realms, the heaven-defying land of fortune that has been sealed since ancient times. Has it all been opened? Saintess Lin Shuem murmured. This time, I shall reign supreme and suppress all my peers. In the wilderness, a young man with an ordinary appearance and an incomparably low profile suddenly transformed into a golden-winged rock, and he revealed a peerlessly ferocious aura as he swiftly vanished. In different regions of the 3,000 worlds, one after another, the peerless figures began to move towards the upper 9 realms. A similar scene was playing out in the immortal burning realm. The crowd surged before the pavilion of absolute apex. Numerous dazzling experts walked into the pavilion of absolute apex under the gazes of envy and reverence. If one observed carefully, one would notice that practically all these experts were from the various sects of the Grand Tao. There were absolute giants of the current generation. There were also ancient freaks. Outside the city, some experts who had long since advanced to the king level also began to take action. These king-level experts only needed to soar into the sky above the pavilion of absolute apex and use their king-level nomological powers to be guided into the passageway to the upper 9 realms. Where's Demon God Lin? What puzzled everyone was that Lin Sun was the only one missing at such a time. As the number 1 on the Great Path Heavenly Stairway, Lin Sun, who had not been shaken in the slightest, did not appear on such a day that attracted worldwide attention. This was undoubtedly too strange. Does he not intend to go to the upper 9 realms? Someone joked. Stop talking nonsense. How can we guess Demon God Lin's thoughts? No matter what, he will definitely go to the upper 9 realms. Suddenly, a thunderous roar resounded in the sky amidst the discussions. Lin Sun, the Golden Crow lineage will be waiting for you in the upper 9 realms. The voice was bone-chilling and filled with boundless hatred. Everyone looked up and saw a black-robed young man standing proudly in the sky. His entire body emitted king-level pressure. It was Wu Yuanjin of the Golden Crow lineage. Previously, he had suppressed Lin Sun in front of the city gates. Everyone's hearts trembled. Demon God Lin had not even entered the upper 9 realms, but he had already been firmly targeted. Blood for blood, Demon God Lin, come to the upper 9 realms if you have the guts. You'd better wash your neck and wait. The upper 9 realms won't give you the chance to be a coward anymore. On the other side of the sky, Miaotsen of the Xuandu Daoist sect, Shang Chong of the Sea Soul clan, Wang Yuntong of the moon-worshipping cult, and other king-level powerhouses all spoke coldly. During this period of time, they had been blocked outside the immortal incineration ancient city. One could imagine how aggrieved they were. Now that the passageway to the upper 9 realms had opened, they could no longer tolerate it. Before they left behind such harsh words. There was a dead silence. Everyone was shocked. Demon God Lin did not make a move to the upper 9 realms now. Was it because he had expected such a scene? Remember what I said. When I become a king-level powerhouse, it will be the time of your death. Suddenly, a chuckle sounded. Everyone turned their heads in unison and saw that Lin Sun had already appeared on the roof of the palace where he resided. He was holding a roasted black dog leg and was gorging on it. He had a leisurely demeanor, as if the king-level powerhouses in the sky were nothing. He had appeared. There was a commotion in the field. No one had expected that Demon God Lin would still be as powerful as before at such a time. Evil creature, you still want to become a king-level powerhouse? Do you think I'll give you a chance later? Wu Yuanjin laughed loudly. His voice was like the cry of an owl, piercing one's eardrums. His words made many people sigh in their hearts. Indeed, Demon God Lin was still not a king-level powerhouse. As long as he entered the upper 9 realms, who would watch him become a king-level powerhouse? It could be foreseen that before he became a king-level powerhouse, he was destined to suffer the cruelest pursuit of these major forces. Let's go. What's the point of talking to someone who's about to die? In the sky, the group of king-level powerhouses sneered and withdrew their gazes. They ignored Lin Sun and leaped into the passage leading to the upper 9 realms, disappearing. At this time, Lin Sun got up lazily and threw away the bow in his hand. Then he waved at the crowd in the distance. Stop looking. I still have something to do. I won't leave now. With that, his figure flashed and disappeared. Something to do? I think he's afraid of being besieged as soon as he enters the upper 9 realms, so he doesn't dare to leave, a descendant of a major force muttered. Immediately, he was reprimanded by his peers. Shut up. Do you want to cause trouble for our sect? As a descendant of a major force, not everyone was qualified to enter the upper 9 realms. In other words, the major forces in the city would still linger in the immortal burning realm, using it as a base to continue to explore and seek opportunities in the immortal burning realm. At this time, as long as Lin Sun didn't leave the city, these major forces would not dare to take him lightly. The passage is only open for a month. I don't believe that Demon Lin will stay here, unless he really doesn't plan to go to the upper 9 realms. Some descendants of the major forces sneered secretly. The situation had changed. In the past, they could only endure because they were afraid of Demon Lin. But everyone knew that Demon Lin would leave eventually. Who would have any scruples and fear? What was more, in the upper 9 realms, there were many people who wanted to kill Demon Lin. Almost on the same day, almost all the strong people in the immortal burning realm who were qualified to enter the upper 9 realms left. 7 days later, in the immortal burning ancient city, it was almost impossible to find anyone who wanted to go to the upper 9 realms. Even those who had been promoted to king-level powerhouses had left the immortal burning realm from outside the city one after another. But to everyone's surprise, 7 days had passed, and there was no sign of Lin Sun going to the upper 9 realms. Was he really afraid? Was he worried that he would encounter unpredictable dangers after entering the upper 9 realms? Or was he waiting for something? That night, a group of figures walked stealthily into the city gate. However, as soon as they entered the city, they were stunned. They saw that the road ahead had been blocked by a lonely figure. "Oh no, it's Demon Lin!" Suddenly, someone screamed. At the same time, Lin Sun also smiled. "I knew you bastards couldn't help but want to enter the city. Do you think I can't protect myself and won't miss you anymore? Run." Those figures were so scared that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. They turned around and fled out of the city. However, Lin Sun had already taken action. With the hegemonic prohibition, the invisible power of prohibition spread, and these figures were immediately imprisoned. Then, their bodies exploded one after another, and blood poured down. They died on the spot. Lin Sun waved his sleeves, and a sea of consciousness and blood on the ground were all evaporated, as if nothing had happened just now. These practitioners were the descendants of the major forces who escaped from the city when Lin Sun carried out the massacre. With Lin Sun in charge, they had never dared to enter the city. Naturally, it was impossible for them to have the opportunity to enter the Apex Tower, so they lost the chance to enter the Upper Nine Realms. Among these major forces, almost all those who had been promoted to kings had left. The rest were the descendants who had not become kings and were not qualified to enter the Upper Nine Realms. They had thought that the situation had changed and Lin Sun would leave sooner or later, so he had no time to care about them. So they boldly planned to enter the city. Who would have thought that as soon as they entered the city, they would be blocked and suffer? Lin Sun's eyes were deep. He quietly looked outside the city gate, but he didn't go out in the end. Instead, he turned around and left. This guy is so treacherous. Not long after Lin Sun left, several figures appeared in the night outside the city, each of them exuding a powerful king's power. What should we do? He neither goes to the Upper Nine Realms nor leaves the city. Some baits that went to the city just now were killed by him. Do we have to wait like this? Someone's voice was low, full of unwillingness and hatred. He has been vigilant for a long time. He is destined not to leave the city. In this case, it's useless for us to wait here. Then let's go. Let's do it. On the streets of the city, Lin Sun wandered alone at a leisurely pace. Not long after, he seemed to perceive something. He looked up at the sky and saw figures full of king's power, leaving one by one. It seems that I really have to kill them all. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold and deep. Who could imagine that in order to deal with Lin Sun, there were so many strong people in the king realm lurking outside the city? Lin Sun didn't need to think at all to know that these people must be from the great forces such as Golden Crow. Chapter 1188. The Tower of the Apex became more and more deserted. The Ladder of Heaven had become a passageway to the Upper Nine Realms. Those who were not qualified to enter the Tower of the Apex were doomed to be unable to enter. Moreover, it had been half a month since the opening of the Upper Nine Realms. Almost all the strong who were qualified to enter the Upper Nine Realms had left. It was the same in the world of burning immortals. Every second mattered in the struggle for the Tao, so time was naturally extremely precious. Therefore, there were very few people like Lin Sun who had already ranked first on the Ladder of Heaven, but had not yet entered the Upper Nine Realms. This made all the practitioners in the city feel very strange. What on earth was Demon Lin waiting for? But for those big forces in the city, they felt depressed. As long as Demon Lin didn't leave, they couldn't feel at ease. Lin Sun didn't care about these. No one knew that he was just waiting for an opportunity. Therefore, whether it was in the 3000 world or the Upper Nine Realms, there was not much difference for him. However, he certainly couldn't give up the opportunity to enter the Upper Nine Realms. In the Upper Nine Realms, there were heaven-defying fortunes that had been sealed for thousands of years, as well as unexpected opportunities. Even for the top kings, it was a great attraction. Moreover, there were many enemies waiting for him in the Upper Nine Realms. If he didn't go there, not only would he not be able to kill the enemies, but he would also be regarded as a threat. Alu hasn't returned yet. It seems that he's already gone to the Upper Nine Realms. What about Old Toad? When will he come out of the Finchin Valley? In the palace, Lin Sun sat quietly and thought. In the end, he made a decision. Before the passage of the Upper Nine Realms closed, if Old Toad didn't appear, he would go alone. Immediately, Lin Sun sighed softly. He had been waiting for many days, but the opportunity to advance did not really come. Do I really have to go to the upper 9 realms to wait for this opportunity? Lin Sun frowned. Waiting meant being passive. He hated this kind of passive feeling the most. In particular, this kind of waiting was related to whether he could advance to the top king realm. As time went by, there were only 3 days left before the passage of the upper 9 realms closed. Lin Sun couldn't stand this kind of passive waiting. He got up, walked out of the palace, and wandered aimlessly on the street. The burning immortal city was still bustling with activity. However, all this excitement had nothing to do with Lin Sun. Walking alone on the street, he wondered whether he should go out of the city and have a look at the Fenchin Valley. Suddenly, Lin Sun stopped and turned around. Behind him, there was a large black bird that looked like a black phoenix. It was holding a large iron pot in its claw and was sneakily planning to launch a sneak attack from behind. The large black bird put away the black pot with a swoosh when it saw this, and it wasn't embarrassed in the slightest. It was calm and composed as it said, "Little brother, we meet again." Lin Sun sneered. "Yeah, every time we meet, it's always in such a special way." The big blackbird chuckled and said, "Sigh, it's just some old habits that can't be changed in a short time. It's fine as long as little brother doesn't mind." As he spoke, he soared into the sky with a whoosh. He flapped his wings, and his speed was inconceivably fast as he flashed towards the pavilion of Apex in the distance. "Dahe, why did you wait until now to leave?" Lin Sun asked loudly. This big blackbird was so weird. Every time they met, it was like a thief. It was very abnormal that it would run away at the slightest disagreement. "You'd better care about yourself. You don't even know that a disaster is coming." There was a hint of gloating in the big blackbird's voice. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. When he was about to ask further, the big blackbird with a wretched aura had already rushed into the pavilion of Apex and disappeared. Obviously, it had gone to the upper 9 realms. A disaster was coming? Lin Sun frowned. Immediately, he found something wrong. Unknowingly, the nearby streets had actually become completely empty. There wasn't a single figure in sight, and it was cold, desolate, and deathly silent. He spread his spiritual awareness, but it was isolated within a range of 3,000 meters. Formation? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. His lonely figure was steaming with brilliant Taoist light, and an invisible power spread. "Taoism, Peer Lin, we have been waiting for you for a long time." In the void in the distance, a monk in black emerged. He was fair-skinned, holding 18 black prayer beads in his hand. His eyebrows were clear, his forehead was full, and his figure was as tall as a pine tree. But there was a kind of palpitating coldness and indifference on his face. Mu Zheng, one of the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha. Lin Sun recognized him at a glance. In the dilapidated temple under the Boundary River, he had a conflict with Mu Zheng and heard the origin of the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple from the Heavenless sect in the sacred place. "Waiting for me?" Lin Sun smiled. This might be the imminent disaster that the big blackbird mentioned. He said, "I have heard that your Ksitigarbha Temple regards me as the number 1 heretic and wants to release me from purgatory. So, you're here to do that?" Mu Zheng put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. "Taoism, Peer Lin, you have sharp eyes." Lin Sun smiled. "In that case, let the others come out." A strange look flashed in Mu Zheng's eyes. He didn't expect that Lin Sun could perceive it. Then he nodded and said, "Taoism, Peer Lin, has the power of a demon, an unparalleled combat power. I'm not sure that I can defeat you alone." As he said this, he said in a low voice, "Brothers and sisters, please come out and meet me." As soon as he finished his words, many figures appeared silently in different directions around Lin Sun. All of them were dressed in black robes, holding prayer beads in their hands and looking solemn. Although they stood silently, they exuded a majestic aura. These 18 people were like 18 great arhats with Tao, immortal, standing on a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. These were the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple, divided into 3 parts: 6 senses, 6 roots, and 6 dust. They represented the 18 top figures who had forged the golden body of Arhut, and each of them had mastered a supreme inheritance. Lin Sun looked as calm as ever, but a cold light flashed in his eyes. He said, "You Ksitigarbha Temple really think highly of me. Even the 18 disciples have come out together. But aren't you worried that all of you will be killed here today?" Muzheng looked cold and indifferent. He remained unmoved and said, "Buddha said that if I don't go to hell, who will? Since we have shown up today, we don't need to worry about life and death." The other 17 black-robed monks also wore indifferent expressions. Obviously, they came prepared. The atmosphere suddenly became solemn. In the empty street and silent atmosphere, Lin Sun was besieged by 18 descendants of Ksitigarbha Temple, which was a depressing picture. "Why do you choose to take action at this time?" Lin Sun frowned and was puzzled. "If we let you enter the upper 9 realms, I'm afraid it will be difficult for us to have a chance to send you to the afterlife." Muzheng looked very magnanimous, but it was this magnanimity that chilled people's hearts. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes and said, "I don't think I have a deep hatred with Ksitigarbha Temple. Why do you still target me like this?" In fact, he had already known the answer from the big blackbird. Now, he just wanted to confirm it again. Muzheng said indifferently, "Don't you understand? You robbed the Taoist scripture and a piece of Bodhi wood left by ancestor Du Ji of Ksitigarbha Temple. In order to protect the inheritance of Ksitigarbha Temple from being leaked, we can only do this." Lin Sun snorted with a touch of contempt on his face. He said, "Muzheng, you know best what happened at that time. I got the Taoist scripture and the Bodhi wood by chance. How can you rob them? If so, the fortunes and opportunities in the absolute domain don't belong to Ksitigarbha Temple. Why do you also come to compete for them?" Speaking of this, Lin Sun smiled silently. His black eyes glanced at the 18 disciples present, and he said softly, "Don't you feel ashamed?" His voice was like thunder. Muzheng's face changed slightly, but he recovered immediately. He said indifferently, "What's the use of quibbling at this time?" After that, he changed the topic and said, "Of course, we aren't willing to make things too difficult for fellow Taoists. So long as you hand over the Tao scripture and Bodhi wood and cripple your own cultivation, then we'll be merciful and definitely leave fellow Taoists alive." Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he laughed involuntarily. "What a damn baldy! I didn't expect that you could say such shameless words." "I'm serious. Fellow Taoist, please reconsider." Muzheng spoke indifferently with a tranquil expression, and he had a bearing as if victory was within his grasp. "Fellow Taoist, please reconsider." The other 17 monks in black also spoke in a loud and solemn voice. Cold killing intent surged in Lin Sun's eyes. He was completely enraged. These bald donkeys were all dignified. They talked about being merciful, but in fact their hypocritical behavior was disgusting. They were even worse than a real villain. "I'm not talented, but I've also mastered some secret methods of Buddhism. Today, I'd like to see who will ascend who." Lin Sun took a deep breath and said in a deep voice. Suddenly, a kind of solemn Zen aura emerged around him. This was the power of the Dharma scripture. Muzheng and others narrowed their eyes slightly and finally couldn't calm down. They were keenly aware that Lin Sun's aura was similar to theirs, but with a trace of different charm. Sure enough, he's a heretic. Muzheng and others were all like angry Buddhas. Their black frock fluttered in the wind, and a terrible, murderous aura emerged. "Let's do it and ascend this guy." A monk with a thick skeleton and a resolute look stepped out, with a grand and surging black Buddha light all over his body. His Buddhist name was Mujing. As soon as he chopped out, he put his palms together, and a skanda suddenly appeared above his head. With a fierce look, he suddenly stepped into the air and punched at Lin Sun. Ksitigarbha Temple's most precious inheritance, wrath of skanda. Boom! The majestic skanda bloomed with infinite Buddha light. When it pressed down, the fist force condensed into the shape of a lotus, which seemed to be able to purify and ascend all things. It was extremely powerful. Lin Sun sneered and put his palms together. Above his head, a skanda also appeared, What was different was that this Dharma idol was surrounded by black phoenix flames, and there was an overbearing aura of destruction amidst its ferocity. Moreover, when he punched out, the fist force evolved into a lotus. In the center of the lotus, there was a black phoenix dancing in the fire, as if it wanted to hit the sky. Dong! The two skanda collided with each other. It was like two gods fighting against each other. Infinite light burst out, and the roar shook the sky. However, with just one blow, the skanda condensed by Mujing was smashed and destroyed by the endless black phoenix fire, turning into ashes. Chapter 1189. It was the same wrath of skanda, but Mujing, one of the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple who had been practicing Buddhism since childhood, was defeated by a layman in one blow. The eyes of Mu Zheng and the others squinted, and they berated in unison. Heretic! Their voices were full of anger. As for Mujing, he revealed an expression of disbelief. Losing to the world-suppressing inheritance that he was most proficient in was a huge blow to him. Tut! A young monk with delicate features stepped out. His Buddhist name was Mu Hong, and he was chanting in Sanskrit. In an instant, a black Buddha light condensed and turned into a rui. The rui was 3 feet long and was imprinted with Buddhist characters. It suddenly chopped down in the void with the power to suppress the sky and the earth. Ksitigarbha Dharma. At the same time, Lin Sun also chanted in Sanskrit and displayed Ksitigarbha Dharma. However, the rui condensed was as big as a mountain and filled the world. The Buddhist characters imprinted on it were condensed by the divine flame of Black Phoenix, which was shocking. Bang! Mu Hong was defeated by the same blow. His face was pale and his chest was undulating. He was so uncomfortable that he almost coughed up blood. This made Mu Zheng and others furious and couldn't believe it. An outsider had used their Ksitigarbha Temple's supreme inheritance to suppress 2 of their fellow disciples. This was simply unimaginable. You regard me as a heresy, but I was defeated by your best Taoism. Isn't it too shameful? Lin Sun looked solemn, with Buddha light flowing all over his body. He was more like a Buddhist practitioner than the Buddhist practitioners of Ksitigarbha Temple. This made Mu Zheng and others a little gloomy. Brothers, this guy has obviously practiced the scripture left by Grandmaster Duji. If we don't eradicate him today, the Taoism of Ksitigarbha Temple will be shaken. Mu Zheng shouted. Other monks said in a deep voice, I'm willing to subdue the demon with my life. Boom! The battle broke out. The 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple all displayed their own Taoism and suppressed Lin Sun from all directions. For a moment, the Buddha light surged and the Sanskrit sounded. There was a grand vision of Buddha chanting sutras and flowers falling from the sky. This place seemed to have turned into a battlefield of Buddhism. At the same time, Lin Sun also launched an attack. The Buddha light spread under his feet and condensed into a 9th-grade black lotus seat. Above his head, a black phoenix hovered and cried in the sky. Burn! A black-robed monk stepped on a huge dragon, looking like a dragon arhat. The prayer beads in his hand glowed and burned fiercely with Buddhist fire. Ksitigarbha Temple's inheritance, purifying lotus fire. Lin Sun's black eyes were calm, and the light of wisdom flowed between his eyebrows. He waved his sleeve and responded with purifying lotus fire. In the blink of an eye, the Buddhist lights collided, and the black-robed monk's face was burnt black. If he hadn't dodged in time, he would have been drowned in the sea of fire. This caused the others to be even more shocked and furious. Moreover, as the battle continued, Mu Zheng and others were shocked to find that no matter what secret method they used, it would be broken by Lin Sun with the same secret method, and the power was even stronger. How is this possible? Their expressions were gloomy and uncertain, and their mental states were affected. Losing to the enemy was not scary. What was scary was losing to the Tao technique that one was most proficient in. This was the most ruthless blow. Puff! Not long after, someone coughed up blood and was injured by Lin Sun's Buddhist Madra. Bang! Soon, another person was shaken by Lin Sun's shout and flew out in the confrontation of Buddha's sound. and his soul almost collapsed. At a glance, the area where Lin Sun walked was surrounded by Buddha's light, lotus thrones, and black phoenix. It was like a real Buddha coming to the world, with Buddha's power as vast as the sea. This caused the eyes of Mu Zheng and the others to almost split apart from rage, and they were beyond furious in their hearts. How could this be? Before, they called Lin Sun a heretic and wanted to send him to the afterlife. Their words were full of indifference and coldness. But at this time, they were like frightened birds. Their hearts were in turmoil, and they no longer had their previous demeanor. For Lin Sun, this battle made him realize that the Dharma scripture of silence written by Holy Monk Du Ji and Black Phoenix Holy Queen was more magical and terrifying than he had expected. This scripture was a combination of the earthly scripture and the inheritance of Black Phoenix. It was deduced by the two sages with supreme wisdom after countless years. How could it be ordinary? It could be said that the profundities of the Tao arts grasped by Mu Zheng and the others have been deduced into the Samsara scripture by Reverend Du Ji a long time ago, and he deduced and improved it once more. Now, all of this was mastered by Lin Sun. When he used it to deal with Mu Zheng and others, it would naturally play an incredible role. For example, all the secrets of Mu Zheng and the others have been exposed. Naturally, they no longer had any deterrence. Rumble. The battle continued. However, the 18 disciples of Ksitigarbha Temple were defeated like a landslide. They were easily suppressed by Lin Sun. At this point, they were all injured and on the verge of collapse. Heresy, do you really think we can't do anything to you? Mu Zheng roared. His body was dyed in blood, his injuries extremely serious. He was like an infuriated, vicious beast, the space between his brows full of resentment. Formation, he shouted loudly while a wisp of resolution flashed between his brows. The other 17 disciples chanted the name of Buddha, and their expressions became solemn, cold, and resolute. An obscure aura that caused one's heart to palpitate surged out from them in unison, and it shot into the sky and caused the heavens and the earth to dim down. A chill suddenly rose in Lin's heart, and he had a premonition that something was wrong. Up! Mu Zheng shouted. Suddenly, a mysterious and complicated formation emerged in this world, like blooming Udumbra flowers in the legend. The next moment, Lin Sun only felt that his figure flashed, and suddenly he had come to the sky above the ancient city of burning immortals. Around him, Mu Zheng, Mu Jing, Mu Heng, and other descendants of Ksitigarbha Temple stood in a square formation, as if they were stepping on a lotus throne. Small Sumeru demon ceiling formation? Lin Sun was shocked at first, but he calmed down after having insight into the mystery of it. He had recognized that the formation formed by Mu Jing and others was also recorded in Dharma Scripture Solitude. The reason why he was silently besieged in the city just now should be due to the power of this formation. You can't think that you can deal with me with this formation, can you? Lin Sun was a little puzzled. In fact, he felt a little uneasy and alert, which made him fully alert and didn't act rashly. At this time, Mu Jing's expression seemed a little strange, with determination, resentment, and a kind of indifference and calmness that faced death with equanimity. The other 17 disciples were the same. Fellow Taoist Lin, I've said it before. After we made the decision to deal with you, we no longer have to worry about our lives. Even the heavens won't spare a heretic like you. Today, you're bound to suffer calamity. Mu Jing looked indifferent. He emphasized on the word tribulation. Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. With a clang, the broken sword suddenly swept out. The sense of crisis in his heart became more and more intense. He realized that he couldn't wait any longer, although he didn't know what kind of killing move Mu Jing and others would use. But he couldn't wait any longer. However, right at the same time that the broken blade flashed out, a strand of obscure aura suddenly surged out from Mu Jing's body and shot into the sky. Boom! For no reason, there was a muffled thunder in the clear sky. The sound was like a divine drum, resounding in Lin Sun's heart, which made his face change suddenly. He took back the broken sword without hesitation. At the same time, countless practitioners in the whole ancient city of burning immortals felt their hearts tremble and their hair stood on end, as if they were stared at by the eyes of God. This is countless pairs of eyes turned to look at the sky. When they saw Lin Sun alone and besieged by 18 monks, many practitioners were shocked and almost couldn't believe it. It's the successor of Kitagarbha Temple. Someone cried out, causing a great commotion. Long ago, there was a rumor that the successor of Kitagarbha Temple regarded Lin Sun as the #1 heretic and wanted to send him to the afterlife. But no one had expected that this scene would actually happen. The whole city was shocked. No one knew how many people were shocked and in an uproar. There were only 3 days left before the passage to the Upper Nine regions closed. When everyone was wondering why Lin Sun didn't take any action, they saw such a scene. Who wouldn't be surprised? The city was shocked, but the sky was depressed and chilling. Lin Sun's black eyes surged with cold light. He looked at Mujing and others one by one, and finally looked up to the sky above his head. There, the blue void had been covered by a layer of ink-black, thick and boundless tribulation cloud, emitting an oppressive and frightening atmosphere. It was so oppressive that it made people unable to breathe. The restless and uproarious practitioners in the city shuddered and felt weak all over. This was a sign that heaven's retribution was coming. More and more tribulation clouds gathered in the sky. It was originally daytime, but at this moment, it seemed to have fallen into an eternal night. You didn't hesitate to attract your kings, weigh heaven's retribution. Don't tell me you want to kill me with the power of tribulation thunder. Lin Sun's black hair flew in the wind, his eyes full of cold light, and his clothes fluttered. Mujing looked indifferent. He nodded and said, "That's right. We have long known that Taoist Lin's combat power is superb and not something we can match. Only with the help of the tribulation power of heaven can we send you to the afterlife." As he spoke, he pointed to the tribulation cloud in the sky and said, "Look, when the tribulation thunder descends, it is destined to cover this place. Although it is my tribulation, you are destined to be unable to escape." Using the power of heaven's retribution to kill Lin Sun. The practitioners in the city gasped and shivered. This successor of Kitagarbha Temple was simply too ruthless. He was completely going to destroy Lin Sun. "Aren't you afraid of death?" Lin Sun's expression was cold. At this moment, he completely understood what Mujing and the others were thinking, and he couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. No wonder these bald donkeys of Kitagarbha Temple were feared by the world. In order to achieve their goals, they could even sacrifice their lives. They were simply too ruthless and crazy. If we can use our lives to help fellow Taoists ascend, even if we die, it will be no different from going to the Western Paradise. Mujing's expression became more and more firm and decisive. Lin Sun took a deep breath and glanced around. He found that the other 17 disciples were all surging with obscure auras, communicating with the sky. Obviously, they were also going to trigger their own kings, weigh heaven's retribution at this moment. 18 people, 18 kings weigh tribulations, were about to descend in this area. Lin Sun's heart sank. There was no chance to escape. There were people going through the tribulation in all directions, and this area was sealed by the small Sumeru demon sealing formation. Not to mention breaking the formation, just getting close to it would be tainted by the tribulation. How could he escape? This was a fatal situation. P.S. Have you ever seen the protagonist kill the enemy with the tribulation? Have you ever seen the enemy kill the enemy with the tribulation? Children, please spend your monthly votes. The more monthly votes you have, the more powerful Devil Lin's tribulation will be. Chapter 1190. If one wanted to step into the king realm, he must go through heaven's retribution. This was the consensus of cultivators. Once this retribution was passed, one could transcend the 5 realms of cultivation and stand on the higher king realm. If not, one would either die or be reduced to a half-step king realm. Mujing and the other Kitagarbha 18 sons were obviously not acting on a whim to trigger the retribution of King Path at this moment. They had planned it for a long time. In the sky, the clouds were thick and heavy, far beyond the ordinary. It was shocking and extremely rare. Such a retribution was rare in the past. Who could imagine that there would be 18 strong cultivators going through the retribution together? Whoosh, in the oppressive dark world, a sudden gust of wind blew between heaven and earth. It was like a demonic sound in chaos, shocking the world. Mu Zheng and the others were silent, looking solemn and determined. They were waiting for their retribution to come so that they could wipe out the heretic Lin Sun. Crazy, Lin Sun murmured. These bald donkeys were indeed too crazy and too ruthless. In order to deal with him, they even risked their lives. He looked up at the sky. The clouds were thick. Although the thunder retribution hadn't come, Lin Sun knew that once it came, the 18 retributions would burst out together, enough to cover this area. He had no way to escape. But how could Lin Sun sit still and wait for death? At this moment, he looked up at the clouds and the sky and suddenly thought that he had been waiting for an opportunity to become a king. He had been passive and helpless these days. On the contrary, the 18 sons of Xitigarbha had fearlessly triggered the thunder retribution of King Path in order to fight him to the death. This was undoubtedly crazy, but greatly inspired Lin Sun. His state of mind was touched, and an uncontrollable thought emerged in his mind. In the city of immortal burning, countless cultivators were depressed. They stared at the sky with horror. They also had a premonition that Lin Sun, who was trapped in the center of the 18 suns, was destined to have no way to escape. Before, they all thought that even if Lin Sun suffered a retribution, it would happen in the upper 9 realms. They didn't expect that everything would happen in advance. This caught them off guard. These monks of the Xitigarbha temple are really abnormal. Is Lin Sun finished? How can he defeat heaven in this situation? Many cultivators sighed with sorrow in their hearts. Fiend God Lin was so peerless and heaven-defying, yet he still couldn't avoid being schemed against. As for the heirs of the large factions, they were all excited and gloating. In their hearts, they thought to themselves, Demon God Lin, to think that such a day would come for you. Boom! The sound of thunder resounded within the tribulation clouds at this moment, and it shook the heavens and the earth, causing the surroundings to tremble. Numerous peerlessly thick bolts of silver tribulation lightning that were visible to the eye surged like numerous lightning dragons that were roiling about, and they were dazzling and resplendent while emitting an aura of obliteration. Many cultivators shivered, and they felt extremely oppressed and horrified. This was a heavenly tribulation, a tribulation from the heavens. Under the tribulation, all living beings were like ants. He's here. Mu Zheng suddenly raised his head, his expression determined. At the same time, the other 17 students raised their heads to look at the sky with solemn expressions, as if they were facing death with equanimity. Lin Sun's long hair fluttered in the wind. His dark eyes were deep and cold, flashing with a frightening luster. His figure was solitary, his clothes fluttered, and his expression was extremely calm. Suddenly he asked, Mu Zheng, as long as I'm alive, will your Xitigarbha temple fight to the death? His voice was indifferent. Alive? A trace of pity appeared in Mu Zheng's eyes. Did this guy really think he could live? That's right. Mu Zheng answered firmly, you can give up now. A cold smile appeared on Lin Sun's lips. Give up now? You're wrong. I just want to tell you one thing before you die. Speak. Mu Zheng's expression became more and more pitiful, as if he was listening to Lin Sun's last words. As long as I'm alive, there will be no Xitigarbha temple in the world one day. Lin Sun said word by word, and his words went straight to the heart. Mu Zheng and the others narrowed their eyes slightly, and then they recovered their composure immediately. Obviously, they took Lin Sun's words as his venting before death, and they didn't care about it all. In the ancient city of immortal burning, all the cultivators were shocked. Obviously, Lin Sun hated the Xitigarbha temple to the core for saying such ruthless words. However, could he survive? The hope was too slim. In the sky, the tribulation clouds were rolling, and the silver tribulation lightning was flickering and rumbling. It was about to descend. Mu Zheng and the others didn't speak a word, and none of them were careless. Of course, they didn't want to die just like that. It would undoubtedly be better if they could successfully overcome the tribulation and kill Lin's son at the same time. Boom! A rumble resounded, and it shocked all living beings. They thought the tribulation had begun. The hearts of Mu Zheng and the others skipped a beat, and they were about to attack and face the tribulation. But what caught the cultivators and Mu Zheng off guard was that the rumble didn't come from the sky, but from Lin's son. At this moment, he looked up at the sky with his black hair fluttering in the wind, and his tall and straight figure had been suffused with dazzling Taoist light. His whole body was like a great abyss that lay across the world, and it seemed to intend to devour the world. The rumble was the sound of the void shattering and collapsing when the abyss rotated. All the cultivators in the city were dumbfounded. He's also going to overcome the tribulation. Mu Zheng and the others were shocked. Does this mean that he's on the verge of death? So he's given up on advancing into the peak of the king realm and intends to overcome the tribulation now. However, in this way, he's bound to be an ordinary king realm existence, even if he survives, and he'll have no fate with the path to become a king. This is equivalent to abandoning the path he seeks, and it's a huge sacrifice. Bang! The tribulation lightning that was surging and surging in the sky had actually stopped at this moment and returned to silence. It seemed as if it had been suppressed. At the same time, a strand of an aura that was even more terrifying and oppressive than before effused out from the depths of the sky. After that, the entire immortal incineration city was shaken. Countless cultivators were terrified to the point their scalps were on the verge of exploding, and their entire bodies felt weak. Some cultivators with slightly weaker strengths directly lay prostrate on the ground and shivered. Wham! An even more unbelievable scene occurred. The energy of the 5 elements that enveloped the entire immortal incineration city actually started to circulate soundlessly at this moment. They seemed to have noticed danger and started to defend themselves. On the other hand, violent winds blew while space fell into disorder outside the city, and it revealed signs of extreme chaos. Amidst the boundless mountains and rivers, groups of mountains were shaking, rocks were collapsing, trees were swaying violently, and countless ferocious beasts that resided in the forests were wailing and fleeing in panic. The rivers, waterfalls, and lakes seemed as if they were seething and rumbling. At this moment, the expressions of all the cultivators that were searching for fortune in different areas of the immortal incineration city had changed, and they felt great terror coiling around their hearts. When they looked up into the sky, they noticed that dazzling and resplendent, gorgeous tribulation clouds had suddenly surged into appearance from the depths of space. It was like a ray of flowing light in the universe, and it carried a form of breathtaking beauty. It was a tribulation cloud. However, it revealed an extremely gorgeous and dazzling color, and it was surging into appearance in the sky at this moment. My God, what sort of tribulation is this? At this moment, countless voices of astonishment resounded from different areas of the immortal incineration city. In other words, the entire immortal incineration city had been alarmed at this moment. To the cultivators in the city, it was like they were witnessing an upheaval of the heavens at this moment. Firstly, the heavenly tribulations caused by the 18 disciples of the Kitagarbha temple could be said to be unparalleled, unprecedented, and terrifying. At this moment, the 18 waves of tribulation lightning hadn't descended yet it had fallen into deathly silence as if it had submitted. Because an even more terrifying, blazing, and world-shocking tribulation cloud had surged into appearance from the depths of space. How should it be described? It was gorgeous and resplendent to the extreme. It illuminated the originally dim heavens and the earth to the point it was bright and resplendent, and it caused space to be dyed in brilliant and blazing light. Numerous crystalline tribulation lightning that seemed like divine chains of order could be faintly seen flickering within the strange and gorgeous tribulation cloud, and it was dreamlike, pure, and supreme. However, boundless terror surged into the hearts of every single cultivator that witnessed this scene. Their bodies stiffened as if they'd fallen into an icy pit, and even breathing was difficult. Mu Zheng and the others were stunned as well. Their hearts shook while their expressions changed with astonishment, and they'd lost their solemn and calm expressions from before. Originally, they intended to overcome the tribulation, yet never had they imagined that the tribulation that belonged to them would actually be completely suppressed. Even more horrifying to them was that as soon as the gorgeous and dazzling tribulation cloud appeared, it caused them to be unable to help but feel terrified and helpless. It was too terrifying. It was utterly indescribable with words. This could it be the ultimate king tribulation that belongs to demonic god Lin? Impossible. Mu Zheng and the others didn't believe it all. Without the assistance of heaven-defying fortune or an unparalleled fortuitous encounter seized by demonic god Lin, how could he possibly have the opportunity to attain the peak of the Tao? If the ultimate king tribulation was so easy to cause, then countless cultivators in the world would have charged into the king realm a long time ago. This was absolutely impossible for it to be the ultimate king tribulation. But why was it so terrifying? Mu Zheng and the others were horrified in their hearts. All of this overturned their understanding, causing them to be unable to make any judgment, and they could only look at Lin Sun in unison. At this moment, Lin Sun's entire body seemed illusory while the glow of the Tao flowed within him. He was shaped like an abyss, and the aura he emanated could be described as vast and boundless like an abyss. Merely a single glance caused Mu Zheng and the others to feel tiny and powerless to be shaken. He's too formidable. Is this demonic god Lin's entire reserve? Mu Zheng and the others were furious. Previously, they had nothing to fear and wanted to use the heavenly tribulation to kill Lin Sun. Even if they had to perish together, they would not hesitate. The effects were very obvious. Lin Sun was trapped and did not dare to break out of the encirclement or approach. He was like a prisoner awaiting death with nowhere to run. However, in the blink of an eye, everything had been reversed. Lin Sun had disregarded everything and triggered the descent of the peerless heavenly tribulation to suppress the power of the heavenly tribulation that belonged to the 18 of them, causing them to fall into a passive position. At this moment, they did not dare to retreat, approach, or attack Lin Sun for fear of being tainted by the terrifying heavenly tribulation. Was this karma? What made them most uneasy was that if they were to transcend the heavenly tribulation at the same time as Lin Sun, it was extremely likely that they would not only have to endure their own heavenly tribulation, but they would also be affected by Lin Sun's heavenly tribulation. That was the most terrifying thing. At the thought of this, Mu Zheng and the others were depressed to the point they wanted to vomit blood, and their faces turned extremely livid. How could they have imagined that a certain death situation would be reversed in such a manner? Chapter 1191. Don't seek external help. Looking at the dazzling tribulation clouds that emerged in the sky, these words resounded ceaselessly in the depths of Lin Sun's heart. At this moment, he completely realized that he'd made a mistake before. He'd always pinned his hopes of attaining the peak of the king realm on that illusory opportunity, so that he fell into a passive state of waiting and couldn't get what he wanted. This had always been in conflict with the path he sought. His Tao did not rely on external objects, nor did he rely on opportunities and fortune. He sought his own Tao. Since that was the case, why should he wait for that opportunity? Don't seek external help. It was also when he fell into a predicament and witnessed Mu Zheng and the others provoking the tribulation that Lin Sun suddenly came back to his senses and awakened from his thoughts. If the opportunity didn't come, why not take the initiative to fight for it? It was precisely when he understood this that Lin Sun completely swept away the haze in his heart, turned passivity into initiative, and resolutely chose to completely release it at this moment. He released his cultivation, path, essence, chi, and spirit to the extreme to seek and seize that opportunity to advance. He didn't disappoint, he succeeded. In the depths of the sky, vast tribulation clouds emerged. They were extremely gorgeous, and unlike the world, They were extremely magnificent. Lin Sun knew that this was his tribulation. As long as he got through it, the king realm would be within reach. Rumble, the tribulation clouds were dazzling and boundless, and they shook the surroundings, causing the entire immortal burning world to fall into a trembling and oppressive atmosphere. This was a great terror that could destroy the world. All the cultivators inside and outside the city shuddered with fear. They felt extremely tiny and helpless, and they shivered all over. Mu Zheng and the other 18 Xitigarbha sons were shocked and furious, and their minds were in turmoil. They similarly felt a fatal threat. Only Lin Sun laughed loudly at this moment, and his voice was like a dragon's roar that shook the 9 heavens. He'd been trapped in the reincarnation developing realm for too long, and he'd waited for too long. Hadn't all these years of hard work and cultivation been for this moment? Life should be enjoyed to the fullest. Although an unprecedented tribulation was approaching, it was the most complacent moment for Lin Sun in his pursuit of the Tao, to obtain the meaning of the Great Way and forget one's own form. This was called being complacent. Looking at the young man in the sky who was laughing with his head thrown back and looking down on the great tribulation, everyone's hearts were filled with shock and complicated emotions. A fatal situation had been reversed in the blink of an eye. Such methods could be said to be able to summon clouds and rain with a flip of the hand. Demon God Lin is destined not to be defeated, someone murmured. As for Mu Zheng and the others, their expressions were extremely ugly at this moment. Lin Sun was regarded as a heretic, and they wanted to eradicate him. They even wanted to die together with him. But now, everything was uncertain, which made their mood extremely bad. Everyone, why don't you come with me? Lin Sun's black eyes were like lightning. With a smile on his lips, he glanced at Mu Zheng and others, exuding an unparalleled and peerless style. Mu Zheng and the others felt their hearts skip a beat as they secretly cried out in alarm. But the situation was already out of their control. As soon as he finished speaking, Lin Sun had already soared into the sky, and his figure was like a great abyss as he met the tribulation cloud in the sky. Rumble. In the depths of the gorgeous and blazing tribulation cloud, numerous tribulation lightning that were like divine chains of order surged out, and every single one of them was crystalline, translucent, divine, and resplendent. It seemed to have been infuriated by Lin Sun's provocation. Along with rumbling that shook the heavens and the earth, a dazzling and crystalline bolt of tribulation lightning struck down first. It was like a chain of heavenly punishment had descended, and it intended to lash the world. Bring it on. Lin Sun didn't dodge, and he leaped up to meet it head-on. The grand Tao around him rumbled as it erupted, and it transformed into a great abyss that collided head-on with the bolt of tribulation lightning. Bang! Lightning shot out as Lin Sun's figure staggered. A bloody hole had been pierced through his shoulder, and his skin was charred black. But along with the circulation of the energy of the undying Grand Tao, this little bit of injury was instantly healed. His entire body was bathed in the collapsing tribulation lightning while a rain of light fluttered about, and he was simply like a demon god that defied the heavens. His mighty and arrogant posture caused the mouths of all the cultivators that noticed this scene to open wide. How peerless and supreme was that tribulation lightning? It was actually blocked just like that. Rumble. At the same time, the 18 waves of tribulation lightning that had been suppressed in the sky and had fallen into silence poured down at this moment. For a time, the sky was completely filled with a torrent of lightning, and it was like a river of tribulation lightning was surging down. It was too terrifying. Merely looking at it from afar caused the cultivators in the city to be terrified to the point their souls almost flew out of their bodies. Many people's souls were terrified, and they fell weakly to the ground. Damn it, this damnable heretic. Mu Zheng and the others were like frightened rabbits, and they cursed as they resisted the tribulation lightning. How could they possibly stay out of it when such a tribulation lightning descended? This was originally a tribulation that belonged to them, but at this moment, it was detonated by Lin Sun. The 18 waves of tribulation lightning converged densely in the same area, and it was equivalent to causing all 18 of them to suffer such a blow at the same time. So, how could it possibly be so easy to resist? In a hurry, Mu Zheng and the others let out shrill cries. They were struck by the tribulation lightning to the point of covering their heads and fleeing like rats, and they wailed endlessly. They had no choice but to resist it desperately. On the other hand, their expressions were extremely unsightly, and they felt like crying yet had no tears. This might be called harming oneself instead of harming others. No, for them Buddhist cultivators, this could only be called the cycle of karma and retribution. High in the sky, Lin Sun laughed with extreme pleasure. These seemingly sanctimonious, but actually hypocritical and shameless baldies had probably never thought that they would encounter such a blow, right? It was so satisfying. It was so satisfying. With a click, a dazzling and translucent chain of tribulation lightning descended and directly struck Lin Sun, who was laughing without any warning, causing his skin and flesh to split open and his bones to almost break. Extreme joy begets sorrow? The corners of Lin Sun's mouth twitched, and he suddenly let out a cold snort. He ignored Mu Zheng and the others, and rushed up violently to resist the tribulation lightning with all his strength. Soon, his body was drowned by the waterfall of tribulation lightning. How could the tribulation be ordinary? What was more, in addition to the extreme king tribulation triggered by Lin Sun himself, there were also 18 waves of King's Way thunder tribulation. Its power could be described as abnormal. Even though Lin Sun's foundation was extremely strong, his body was still convulsed by the lightning. His skin was cracked and charred, and his limbs and bones were broken inch by inch. From a distance, his whole body looked like a piece of charcoal. Mu Zheng and the others who were fighting the tribulation angrily were overjoyed when they saw this. They couldn't wait for Lin Sun to be struck to death and erased. The cultivators in the city were extremely nervous and gasped. Such an unprecedented tribulation lightning was really not so easy to resist. Even a heaven-defying figure like Demon God Lin was in danger. But soon, the thunderstorm that covered the sky collapsed with a bang, and Lin Sun's tall and slender figure appeared. He bit a piece of thunder bamboo, and the thunder's spiritual liquid within it gurgled into his mouth. In an instant, Lin Sun, who was charred all over and severely injured, recovered as if he had undergone nirvana. Again, Lin Sun didn't hesitate, and his momentum became even more disdainful as he soared into the sky. In his hands, besides thunder bamboo, there were also golden wind dew, tranquilizing powder, stellar aperture recovery pill, fountain of youth, multicolored chalcedony, and other rare treasures. These were originally the precious medicines that the mysterious woman in the gate to heaven had prepared for Lin Sun when she visited the 6 ancient orthodoxies. Now they were finally put to use, and the effect was remarkable. Rumble. The extremely dazzling and resplendent tribulation lightning grew more and more terrifying. Every time it descended, it seemed as if it intended to destroy the world. A myriad of tribulation lightning poured down and covered the space there. Moreover, the tribulation lightning transformed ceaselessly. Sometimes it transformed into sabers, spears, swords, halberds, ancient cauldrons, seals, vases, and so on and so forth. In the end, it even developed into lightning palaces, mountains, rivers, and cities. This caused all the cultivators in the city to be stunned on the spot with dazed expressions. Such an unprecedented tribulation lightning had completely exceeded their understanding. It was too unbelievable and boundlessly terrifying. They didn't dare believe that such a tribulation could exist in the world. During this process, Lin Sun suffered heavy injuries over and over again. His body cracked like a piece of cloth, and blood flowed like a waterfall. In severe cases, he was almost killed on the spot. It caused everyone's hearts to rise to their throats, and they were extremely nervous to the point they almost forgot to breathe. For the sake of healing his injuries, the precious medicines in Lin Sun's possession were consumed at an astonishing speed. It wasn't that he wasn't strong enough, But the tribulation this time was formed from the combination of the 18 king tribulations and the ultimate king tribulations, and it was too abnormal. It caused everyone to be unable to help but suspect that if it was any other peerless figure, that person would have probably been eliminated a long time ago. Damn it, Mu Zheng and the others were originally excited, and they wished for nothing more than for Lin Sun to be struck to death. However, Lin Sun always turned danger into safety every single time and recovered as if he couldn't be killed. It caused them to be depressed to the point of almost going mad. But in next to no time, they couldn't be bothered about all of this, because Lin Sun's tribulation had started to spread towards them. Bang! A crystalline bolt of tribulation lightning that was shaped like a halberd charged over. Mu Jing's expression changed abruptly. He was fighting against his own tribulation, so he was utterly unable to dodge and could only go head-on against it. Then, a scene that sent chills down everyone's spines occurred. Even though Mu Jing resisted desperately, he was still like a piece of paper, and he was struck to death by the halberd. His body exploded into pieces and transformed into ash. No! Mu Zheng and the others' eyes almost split apart with rage, and blood flowed from the corners of their eyes. Even though they'd held the intention to take him down with them, it was still difficult for them to accept when death truly arrived. On the other hand, the cultivators in the city finally realized how freakish Lin Sun was. Mu Jing had been blasted to death like a piece of paper, yet Lin Sun had been constantly fighting against this level of tribulation lightning. Wasn't that freakish? Bang! Along with a shrill cry, another black-clothed monk was blasted to death, and he was instantly obliterated in both body and soul. It wasn't that they weren't strong enough, but the tribulation lightning this time was the same to them, just like Lin Sun. It was a combination of 18 waves of tribulation lightning and the ultimate king tribulation. How could they resist this? This was a hopeless situation, and they couldn't even escape it. They could only fight with their lives on the line. Even though Mu Zheng and the others were unafraid of death, they couldn't help but feel a wave of sorrow in their hearts at this moment, and they felt despair and boundless regret. If they knew this would happen, they would absolutely not have chosen to act in this way. Unfortunately, regret was useless in the end. Perhaps reaping what they sowed was the best way to describe them at this moment. Bang! 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 In the following period of time, numerous disciples of the Kitagarbha Temple were blasted to death, and they didn't even have the chance to be reduced to the half-step king realm. Everyone in the city couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They brought this upon themselves. P.S. The 3rd chapter is up. Goldfish planned to post one more chapter and fight it out to finish this plot. However, it would probably be around midnight by now. Those who couldn't wait would read it tomorrow after waking up. Chapter 1192. Crack! A cauldron formed by tribulation thunder descended, crystal clear and exuding a destructive aura. No! Mu Heng roared and turned to flee. However, only by facing the tribulation could one have a chance to survive it. Fleeing would only lead to a more miserable death. Bang! Mu Heng's body exploded and turned into ashes. Normally, the great trial of King Path could not stop them at all with the foundation and talent of the 18 Ksitigarbha sons. Unfortunately, today's situation was too special. The 18 great trial of King Path and the Extinction King's tribulation all covered a part of the world. Not to mention them, even other top talents would find it hard to resist. Mu Zheng was already extremely sad and angry. He roared to the sky, regret, annoyance, unwillingness, hatred, all kinds of emotions surged in his heart. Is it really retribution? Mu Zheng's voice was like the roar of a beast on the verge of death. All the cultivators in the city felt sad. In the past, almost no one who went against Demon God Lin had a good ending, like Golden Crow, Xuandu Taoism Sect, Sea Spirit Clan, Bee Spirit Mountain, and so on. Now, the 18 Ksitigarbha sons were obviously finished. On the other hand, Lin Sun was still fighting fiercely like a demon god. He was so powerful that it made people's hearts tremble. Comparing the two, how could people not sigh? Soon, 17 of the 18 Ksitigarbha sons had been killed, leaving only Mu Zheng. At this moment, he was on the verge of death. He had given up resisting like a numb walking corpse. He looked up at Lin Sun, and a sentence appeared in his mind. As long as I'm alive, there will be no more Xidagarba temple in the world. Boom! At the same time, a thunder exploded in his heart. Mu Zhang's vision went black and he lost consciousness. Before he died, there was only one thought in his heart. If Lin Sun survived, there would be no more peace in the Xidagarba temple. At this point, the 18 Xidagarba temple were all killed by the tribulation. This made people's hearts tremble, especially the descendants of the great forces. They were all shocked and terrified. In such a fatal situation, Lin Sun was safe and sound, but in the end, the 18 Xidagarba temple died. How could this not be shocking? If Xidagarba temple knew that the 18 disciples of this generation had all died like this, how would they feel? Boom! In the sky, the lightning tribulation continued to erupt. It was resplendent and dazzling. Vaguely, Lin Sun's figure was like an invincible god of war who had never been defeated so far. With the death of Xidagarba's 18 sons, the 18 thunder tribulations strangely did not disappear, but all aimed at Lin Sun. This was the consequence of being tainted by tribulations. The reason why Lin Sun didn't choose to break out of the encirclement and even didn't approach the 18 Xidagarba sons when he was trapped before was that he was afraid of being involved in the tribulation caused by them. But now he had no way out. Victory was king. Defeat death. There was no other choice. Boom! Lin Sun was hit into the air again. His whole body was covered in smoke, and his skin was burnt black. It was a horrible sight to see, but Lin Sun's eyes became bright. He could feel that his Taoist root, essence, and spirit were undergoing amazing changes in such a confrontation. As Xiao Chan swallowed the celestial tribulation pill, he raised his head. The tribulation clouds in the sky churned, and it was incredibly stifling. The real danger had arrived. Lin Sun took a deep breath. He was keenly aware that the breath in the tribulation cloud was changing. Boom! Suddenly, thousands of brilliant thunder tribulations burst out. When they fell from the sky, they evolved into thousands of creatures. There were immortal birds bathed in thunder and dancing their wings. There were fierce beasts with bodies as big as mountains. They roared down like an army and filled the sky. God! Inside and outside the city, everyone's eyeballs almost fell out. Was there still a way out? Kill! Without thinking too much, Lin Sun let out a long roar and fought with all his strength. He released his strength unprecedentedly without any reservation. This was his path of cultivation, different from the world and the ages. Everything was destined, and the tribulation he faced was completely different. Even though he tried his best, it didn't take long for Lin Sun's hair to fall off. His body was cracked, and his hair was burnt and peeled off. In the end, even his tendons and bones were broken, and his internal organs were seriously injured. He encountered a great crisis. This kind of peerless king tribulation was absolutely unprecedented. It was too horrible, but at the same time, Lin Sun also felt that the tribulation thunder contained the surging essence of the Great Way. As long as it was defeated, it would be absorbed by him. Kill! Lin Sun had no choice but to fight desperately. Since he started his cultivation, he had experienced countless life and death tribulations and rose up in the tempering of blood and fire. All his achievements were earned by himself. Today's heaven's retribution might be unprecedented, but Lin Sun was not afraid of it. His injuries were getting more and more serious, but his spirit, qi, and spirit were highly condensed. The cultivation in his body gave birth to a stream of Great Way essence, emitting surging vitality. It was like forging iron in a furnace. The impurities were quenched, and the unique essence was enough to forge the sharpest and most powerful sword in the world. This was a test of life and death, fighting in the great horror between life and death. Only transcendence could break the barrier of life and death and set foot on the king realm. The sea of consciousness between his eyebrows was shining. His soul was like a lamp, which seemed to illuminate the fog ahead. Boom! In the end, Lin Sun survived this tribulation. His flesh and blood were dry, and his skin was scorched and peeled off. He was seriously injured and dying. But as he absorbed the scattered tribulation thunder and light, amazing changes happened to his whole body. His flesh and blood were healed, and his tendons and bones were rebuilt. A surging essence of the great way surged in his body, washing his limbs and bones, making his whole body like a nirvana in fire, glowing with strong and blazing vitality. In the end, his whole body was shining with magnificent Taoist light, like an exiled immortal, unspeakably holy. This was an amazing transformation, a sign that he was entering the king realm. The world was silent and more oppressive. The tribulation clouds were thick and extremely gorgeous and did not dissipate. This almost made everyone in the city dumbfounded. Was it not over yet? What level of peerless king tribulation was this? Whoosh! Suddenly, there was a gust of wind. When it got close to Lin Sun, it burst out with dazzling lightning and invincible killing intent. This wind, thunder tribulation, was extremely strange. In an instant, Lin Sun coughed up blood and was sent flying. It seemed to sweep him up and then tear him apart. Lin Sun had just resolved this tribulation thunder with great difficulty. Flames poured down like a sea, which was also formed by thunder tribulation and had the power to incinerate everything. In a flash, Lin Sun was submerged in the sea of fire. Strangely, his body was not injured, but his soul was suffering unprecedented burning and the severe pain was unbearable. Lin Sun ran meditating magic and urged his spirit, which had already reached the level of divine flower gathering in acupoint, to fight against it. Every time an attack was defeated, the small spirit's body was a little brighter. Until all the attacks were defeated, the small spirit was bathed in divine fire, like a scorching sun, shining brightly in the sea of consciousness and illuminating itself. The fire-thunder tribulation was broken, but then there were endless ice and snow and cold currents. It was incredible. This time, the peerless king tribulation first deduced weapons and ancient treasures, and then condensed the images of mountains and rivers, palaces and cities. After that, they transformed into lifelike birds and beasts. Until now, they had turned into scenes of natural disasters such as wind, snow, and fire. Not to mention Lin Sun, even the practitioners inside and outside the city had never seen such a spectacle, which was extremely incredible. Gradually, Lin Sun was about to be unable to hold on and became dizzy. He had suffered an unimaginably serious blow. It was too miserable. Many practitioners couldn't bear to see it. This was the great horror between life and death. One careless move would destroy his soul. Kill! Lin Sun let out a roar, tried to keep his mind clear. He tried his best and used up all his cultivation. The kind of resolute and disdainful attitude moved and shocked countless people. What was a real talent? This was it. Unyielding against heaven and earth, never giving up. In this battle, Lin Sun was on the verge of despair, struggling between life and death, experiencing unprecedented hardships and dangers. Every time he defeated the tribulation thunder, he would gain vitality, improve his strength, and transform his body inside and outside. There was vitality in danger, and a new life emerged in destruction. Kill! But no matter what happened, Lin Sun's eyes were always blazing, and his fighting spirit didn't diminish. No matter what kind of damage he suffered, he was never discouraged. Both inside and outside the city were silent. Invisible shock pervaded everyone's heart. All eyes were fixed on the lonely fighting figure in the sky, and they were in a trance. Boom! After countless struggles, the tribulation thunder in the sky collapsed into a rain of light. At this time, Lin Sun's vitality was almost exhausted. This battle was so difficult that he fought to the extreme and forgot everything. His body was broken, scorched, and haggard, without an inch of intact body. But his figure was still tall and straight, like a mountain that had never been bent. Did I succeed? When he looked up with difficulty, he saw that the tribulation clouds in the sky had disappeared. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then gradually woke up from his dazed and numb consciousness. All was quiet, and the world was silent. Only he stood proudly under the sky alone. He succeeded. An indescribable emotion emerged in Lin Sun's heart. Then, he suddenly looked up to the sky and let out a long roar. That howl was like a new king that was announcing its arrival, and it caused the surroundings to tremble while the heavens, earth, mountains, and rivers resonated with it. Countless cultivators inside and outside the city were stunned, and their hearts were filled with indescribable awe and shock. Boom! Around Lin Sun, a big abyss emerged and engulfed the universe. From all directions, countless tribulation thunder and light rain surged and poured into Lin Sun's broken, scorched, and scarred body. Then, his aura underwent an earth-shattering change. Inside and outside his body, his injuries were healed invisibly. His blood and chi were surging like lava. His muscles and bones were as white as jade, and the bright light of Tao flowed in his internal organs, emitting surging vitality like the sea. His divine soul was like a lamp, illuminating his body alone, as if immortal and eternal. And in his body, the place where the wheel of development was originally condensed was replaced by a Tao seed with bright luster. P.S. The fourth update is here. Demon God Lin finally set foot in the King Realm. Next, it was the competition for the upper 9 realms, which would be more exciting. Chapter 1193. At the instant that the Tao seed was condensed, Lin Sun felt unprecedentedly strong. It seemed as if even the corrosion of time couldn't destroy him. It wasn't that his lifespan wouldn't increase, but it was a form of longevity. Bang! The heavens and the earth were trembling while the void rumbled. Boundless light flowed, and it illuminated Lin Sun to the point he was dazzling, pure, and otherworldly. Unlike the miserable and sorry state he was in earlier, he stood towering in the sky. Even though he didn't move, he emanated the might of looking down upon the world. The hearts of countless cultivators inside and outside the city trembled, and they felt boundless pressure and reverence. The King Realm stood proudly above the 5 realms. Its soul was like a lamp, and it was eternal. If a saint didn't appear, then the King Realm reigned supreme. In the entire ancient desolation region, only 1 in 10,000 could step foot into the King Realm, and it was extremely rare. Such strength was sufficient to be called an overlord of the world, and it was capable of deterring a region and being respected by all. There were differences in the King Realm as well. A king that hadn't condensed the Tao seed was a false king. On the other hand, Lin Sun was bound to be different from a king in the secular world. He'd overcome the peerless king tribulation, forged the peerless Tao seed, and stepped foot into the peerless King Realm. Such a realm had never been born throughout the ages. It was only after the descent of the peerless domain this time that some ancient freaks and top figures had stepped foot into this realm. But they were extremely few. Even amongst the top figures, it was 1 in 1,000. Yet Lin Sun had stepped foot into this realm today. This was unbelievable, because everyone clearly saw that from the beginning until the end, Lin Sun hadn't obtained any heaven-defying fortune, nor had he obtained the assistance of heaven-defying fortune. He'd forcefully triggered an unprecedented and rare, peerless tribulation by himself, and then he'd broken through the lightning tribulation to become a king. This was something that no one could believe or predict. All of this meant that the path Lin Sun took was destined to be different from other peerless kings. It was like a miracle. Rumble. In the sky, Lin Sun's body rumbled, and he was undergoing the final transformation and sublimation. He closed his eyes and sensed the changes in his body in meditation. Within his body, the wheel development no longer existed. It was replaced by a strange and resplendent Tao seed. It gathered all of his cultivation and contained an unimaginably terrifying vitality. It was smooth, translucent, ethereal, and resplendent. As the chi and blood in his body circulated, it resonated with him from afar, producing a strange rhythm that was like breathing. The Tao seed was the foundation of the King Realm, the foundation of one's Tao. It was like a seed. Along with the advancement of one's cultivation, the seed would take root, sprout, and grow vigorously to become a towering tree. This tree could be called eternal life. The Tao seed was the core of the reason king realm experts in the world were able to seek the path to immortality. Obviously, Lin Sun's Tao seed was different from that of other kings. It was shaped like an abyss, with water and fire swirling around it. There was undying energy within it, and there was a true dragon within it. It was incomparably mystical, and the backing it contained was also incomparably terrifying. Meanwhile, in his sea of consciousness, his soul similarly underwent a transformation. Like a divine lamp, his primordial spirit condensed into a second jade-like, translucent divine flower. This flower's name was Present World Insight. This realm was the second of the 3 realms of divine flower gathering in one's head. Generally speaking, only those who set foot in the king realm for the first time had the power to seek and comprehend the power of divine flower gathering in one's head. It could be seen from this that Lin Sun had long surpassed his peers in the transformation of his soul. At this time, even if he was killed, as long as he stepped out of his primordial spirit, he would have the power to rebuild his body and regain the power of rebirth in the future. In addition to the brand new transformation of his cultivation and soul, Lin Sun's spirit, perception of the great Tao, and control of the power of martial arts were also completely different from before. This was a kind of extreme transformation, no less than nirvana. It was a kind of sublimation of the essence of life, transcending the 5 realms and the past. He was completely different. From now on, what Lin Sun wanted to seek was the path to immortality. What he wanted to comprehend was the law of kingship, and what he wanted to master was the power of kingship. Who, after a long time, Lin Sun exhaled a long breath and suddenly opened his closed eyes. In an instant, 2 flashes of lightning cut through the void, which was extremely frightening. Lin Sun's inner excitement and joy all calmed down at this moment. He converged his breath. Just from the appearance, he was no different from before, indifferent and transcendent. But only in the eyes of his peers could they clearly feel that Lin Sun was like an invisible abyss, unfathomable and frightening. Whoosh! In an instant, Lin Sun's figure disappeared out of thin air. After a long time, the practitioners inside and outside the city gradually woke up from that kind of shock. Heaven's retribution collapsed. Lin Sun became the king, and the 18 sons of Ksitigarbha had been erased. When they recalled these scenes, the expressions of every single cultivator became complicated, and they carried reverence, fear, envy, and a sense of loss. The passage of the upper 9 realms had been open for nearly a month, but Lin Sun didn't leave. Many practitioners thought that he was worried about being besieged after entering the upper 9 realms and losing his life. Even some descendants of major forces secretly speculated that as long as Lin Sun dared to go there, he was bound to be killed by others. But no one expected that today. Lin Sun became a king, and a supreme king at that. I'm starting to worry about the enemies of Demon God Lin. Some people looked strange. Do you remember that before Wu Yuanjin, Miao Xin, Wang Yuntong, and Shang Chong went to the upper 9 realms, these kings said that they would end Demon God Lin's life in the upper 9 realms? It could be foreseen that these guys are going to be out of luck. Many people's expressions became strange. Fenchen Valley. Lin Sun's figure suddenly appeared in front of the mysterious divine fire palace. There are only 3 days left. Why hasn't the old toad appeared yet? With his nature, how could he miss all kinds of heaven-defying opportunities in the upper 9 realms? Lin Sun looked at the palace. After advancing to the king realm, his perception had become different from before. At this moment, in his eyes, the aura of this palace was extremely terrible. It was related to the divine path. If he broken by force, he was bound to end miserably. After a while, Lin Sun grabbed a huge rock, pressed his fingers together like a sword, and engraved a line of words on it. I'll go first. See you in the upper 9 realms. Then, with a bang, the rock was inserted into the ground by Lin Sun. Lin Sun believed that if the old toad came out, he would definitely notice it. Whoosh! In front of a fiery red river, Lin Sun's figure floated. When he first arrived in the realm of burning fairies, a strange big fish with extremely fierce combat power had appeared in the depths of this river. Although he didn't kill the fish in the end, Lin Sun inadvertently discovered the secret in the depths of the river. Lin Sun's figure flashed and sneaked in. At the bottom of the river, there was a mysterious bronze gate, engraved with mottled Taoist patterns and shining with a strange luster. On the other side of the bronze door stood a stone pillar with a thick and translucent fiery red chain coiled around it. The other end of the chain was tied to a stone statue of a fierce beast. The fierce beast was like a dragon with a coiled body. It was as huge as a mountain, vivid and lifelike. When Lin Sun arrived, the stone statue of the fierce beast seemed to come to life, exuding a terrible evil spirit, which made the river boil. Clatter! The fiery red chain tied to the stone statue of the fierce beast glowed, crystal clear, and mysterious symbols appeared, suppressing the evil spirit. Lin Sun was not surprised. He had seen this scene before, but at that time he was still in the reincarnation developing realm, so he didn't dare to come here rashly. But now, Lin Sun was in the king realm, so he would not be afraid. With a flick of his sleeve, a surge of energy rushed out and pushed against the tightly shut bronze door. Boom! To Lin Sun's surprise, the bronze gate was easily pushed open, revealing the scene inside. Inside the gate was an extremely old palace, but it was empty, as if it had been buried for countless years. In the center of the palace stood a fiery red Taoist altar. According to Lin Sun's speculation, there should have been some treasures on the Taoist altar, but now it was also empty. Soon, Lin Sun noticed that on the dusty ground, there was a line of footprints, which was extremely light. Qi Yao! Lin Sun sensed it and keenly captured a unique breath, which he was sure came from Qi Yao. She came one step ahead of me, and seems to have taken away the good fortune left here. Lin Sun frowned. Originally, he planned to come here before going to the Upper Nine Realms to see if he could get any good fortune, but now it seemed that it was impossible. No, there is still a wisp of tribulation energy in this hall that has not completely dissipated. Suddenly, Lin Sun's black eyes narrowed. Could it be that Qi Yao had obtained a good fortune here and became a king in one fell swoop? Lin Sun had just passed the ultimate king tribulation, so he was very familiar with the tribulation energy. He could conclude that there had been a great tribulation here. If that was the case, the current Crimson Jade had probably already become a king at the pinnacle. After all, she had been silent for tens of thousands of years in order to reach the supreme king realm. Since she had chosen to pass the tribulation, it was definitely not as simple as just stepping into an ordinary king realm. Lin Sun couldn't help but sigh with emotion. When he had just arrived at the burning immortal realm, he had accidentally discovered this mysterious place of good fortune. If he had grasped it at that time, would he have been able to step into the ultimate king realm a long time ago? Now, it had benefited Qi Yao instead. But right after that, Lin Sun shook his head and smiled. His path towards the Tao had never been pinned on such illusory good fortune and good fortune. In the end, Lin Sun left. At the bottom of the river, the ferocious beast statue that was bound and suppressed by fiery red chains suddenly opened its eyes after Lin Sun left. It was icy cold and indifferent, and it flowed with an extremely ghastly and bloodthirsty aura. Interesting, this kid actually has the aura of Old Man Xingyan. Unfortunately, I can only wait until this ultimate domain is destroyed before I have a chance to break free from the suppression of Chen Linkong and return to the ancient Starhan path. But I wonder how long I have to wait. A sigh that revealed endless unwillingness and hatred resounded faintly at the bottom of the river. Then, the ferocious beast statue closed its eyes. Everything returned to calm. Ancient City of Immortal Incineration. Chapter 1194. Lin Sun stood above the immortal burning city. In the city, some cultivators had already noticed this scene. They couldn't help but stop what they were doing and look up. Everyone knew that Demon Lin was going to leave the immortal burning realm for the Upper Nine regions. Child Lin, I wish you a safe journey. A young girl summoned up her courage and shouted out loud. Suddenly, other cultivators also reacted and spoke out one after another. Taoism Pier Lin, the upper 9 regions are extremely dangerous. You must take care. We are all looking forward to seeing Child Lin dominate the upper 9 regions and defeat all the talents in the world. Take care. Men and women, old and young, all of them gave their blessings from the bottom of their hearts. All of these cultivators were cultivators that didn't belong to any sect, or they were from small powers. They all knew very well that if it weren't for Lin Sun's presence in the city, it would have been impossible for them to get rid of the oppression and exploitation of those big forces. Now that Lin Sun was about to go to the upper 9 regions, they could only express their gratitude and blessings in this way. Lin Sun was stunned at first, and then he smiled and cupped his hands without saying anything. Humph! He is not the only one who has become a king. Demon Lin, you must be careful when you go to the upper 9 regions. Don't get into trouble. However, just as Lin Sun was about to leave, a sarcastic snort sounded. It was obviously intentional and very loud. Then, a burst of laughter sounded, which sounded more and more harsh. Everyone looked up and saw a group of men and women standing there, making unscrupulous remarks about Lin Sun and making sarcastic remarks. They were the descendants of a big force. What are you looking at? Demon Lin has become a king. Can he rush into the city and kill us? The golden-robed young man sneered, looking very unscrupulous. The other cultivators' expressions changed, but they had to admit that they couldn't refute this. Becoming a king meant that he couldn't enter the city. At that time, Demon Lin also hid in the city and got a chance to save his life. Otherwise, how could he be alive today? The golden-robed young man became more and more unscrupulous, and his voice was full of mockery. Lin Sun was a little surprised. He didn't expect that before he left, these guys couldn't help but have a complacent attitude. Demon God Lin, are you unconvinced? Noticing Lin's gaze, the golden-robed man couldn't help laughing. He pointed at his nose and said, "Come on, I'm right here. Come and kill me if you dare." This sort of behavior caused the other cultivators to be unable to bear it any longer. Everyone around the golden-robed man roared with laughter, fearless. However, right at this moment, the eyes of the golden-robed man who was laughing complacently suddenly bulged out, and then his entire body suddenly twitched violently. Then, under everyone's shocked gazes, he knelt on the ground with a thud and never got up again. His companions nearby were all dumbstruck. The complacent smiles on their faces froze, and their eyes were wide open in disbelief. How? How could this be? At this time, Lin Sun said with a smile, "Everyone can see clearly that this guy asked to kill him. Don't blame me." His words were casual, but sent chills down one's spine. The other heirs of the great powers who noticed this gasped and went silent like cicadas in winter. However, Lin Sun had already withdrawn his gaze and didn't want to argue with him anymore. Whoosh! At the same time, Little Silver also returned and asked with some doubts, "Master, why don't you let me kill them all?" Lin Sun said casually, "I'm afraid of dirtying your hands. If you want to kill the strongest of their sections." As he said, his figure flashed and rushed into the passage leading to the upper 9 realms. There was a dead silence in the immortal burning city. Although Lin Sun had left, his prestige still remained, and no one dared to speak blatantly. Distant Fire Realm, one of the upper 9 realms. In a primitive jungle that was rarely visited by humans. Decaying leaves piled up on the ground. The branches and leaves of the ancient trees covered the sky. There was no sunlight all year round, which made the place dark and damp. Occasionally, there was a shrill roar, which was particularly horrifying in this silent and gloomy atmosphere. This was obviously in the deep mountains. Ancient trees towered to the sky, giant vines spread, ancient beasts roared, and fierce birds flew across the sky with an ancient and desolate atmosphere. Lin Sun walked in it with a trace of amazement on his face. If he hadn't been sure that time had not been reversed, he would have suspected that he had come to the primitive era at the beginning of ancient times. Everything was ancient, primitive, and suffused with a boundless aura that assaulted the face. This was the distant fire realm. It was like a big world in which there were many secret realms, relics, and taboo areas. Lin Sun had been here for a quarter of an hour. The most urgent thing is to find a place to cultivate, stabilize the foundation of the king's realm, and perfectly control the power of the king's realm. The king's realm has begun to control the power of Tao. It's not difficult for me, but it takes time to comprehend. At the same time, it's time to consider forging my own supreme weapon of King's Way. Lin Sun shuttled through the deep mountains and old forests, observing the situation around and thinking silently in his heart. The supreme weapon of King's Way was the life treasure of every king's realm strongman. If it was properly cultivated, it could exert unimaginable power. In the past, Lin Sun had seen many practitioners use this level of treasure. But most of them were not their own treasures, and their cultivation was below the king's realm, so they couldn't exert the power of such treasures at all. By the way, there's also the gate to heaven. Lin Sun thought of one thing. The mysterious woman once said that when he stepped into the Extinction King's realm, he could enter the heaven-accessing place again. Immediately, Lin Sun shook his head. There was no hurry. Every time he entered the heaven-accessing place, he would have a chance to get out safely. If he encountered an irresolvable danger, he could make full use of this opportunity. The ancient forest was dark, but the spiritual qi was extremely strong. Along the way, Lin Sun saw a lot of spiritual medicines, most of which were tens of thousands of years old, and many king medicines were transformed from them. Lin Sun naturally picked them without hesitation. When he was crossing the Extinction King's tribulation, the Thunder Yuan spiritual liquid, the Golden Wind Dew, the Star Aperture Recovery Pill, and other treasures had already been consumed. Now, there were only more than 10 king medicines left, which were far from enough for future cultivation. Because the king's realm was different from the 5 realms, the power needed for cultivation was too great, and the spiritual marrow was far from enough. Suddenly, Lin Sun felt a chill in his heart. A blazing Taoist light appeared all over his body, and his figure suddenly disappeared. Boom! The ground where he had been standing exploded, and a huge white bone claw stretched out from below, smashing the trees within a radius of 300 meters, and the void collapsed. Looking from a distance, each bone of the giant white bone claw was as big as a stone pillar, branded with twisted, blood-colored Taoist patterns. The aura it emitted was so fierce that it seemed to be able to crush the sun, the moon, the mountains, and the rivers. Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp, feeling horrified, and stayed far away from this area. He remembered what the old toad had said before. The Upper Nine Realm was different from the 3,000 worlds. There were heaven-defying fortunes and heaven-defying tribulations, and everywhere was mysterious and weird. Even if the sages from the outside world had the opportunity to enter, they would never dare to break in. For example, the giant white bone claw that suddenly stretched out from the ground made Lin Sun, who had stepped into the Extinction King's realm, feel frightened. It could be imagined how dangerous this place was. This also sounded the alarm for Lin Sun, so he didn't dare to think too much. He concentrated on his journey and planned to leave this deep forest first. Whoosh! He rose into the air, intending to fly away. However, he just charged into the treetop area when a cry suddenly resounded, and then a ferocious flying beast suddenly charged out from the depths of the dense treetop that covered the sky. It was only 3 m long, and its pupils were silver in color. Its wings seemed as if they were made from golden divine iron and flowed with a terrifying glow of the Tao. Moreover, a pair of sharp claws stretched out, causing the nearby space to shatter and collapse like a piece of cloth. Lin Sun suddenly retreated and broke out in a cold sweat. In his divine sense, he didn't notice the existence of such a fierce bird at all. Fortunately, after being alarmed, the fierce bird directly rushed into the sky and ignored Lin Sun. Otherwise, according to Lin Sun's estimation, he would have to go through at least a hard battle to get out. Because the aura of this fierce bird was too strong, and the aura it released was stronger than any King Realm strongman he had ever seen. What the hell is this place? Lin Sun muttered to himself, looking a little solemn. He knew that what he needed to do most at the moment was to learn as much as possible about this strange and dangerous world and get more information. Otherwise, he was bound to be passive. On the way, Lin Sun was extremely careful and cautious. He also operated the wind-mocking eyes and dared not to neglect anything. Even so, he still encountered many dangers along the way. For example, an ancient tree with a body as red as blood suddenly came to life, and its branches were like thousands of huge whips, which broke the void and made long and narrow cracks. For example, a seemingly ordinary mountain emitted wisps of black Taoist light, which could silently devour all the creatures that approached it. In addition, there were also strange void cracks appearing from time to time. Every time they appeared, an area would be directly annihilated and completely wiped out. For several times, Lin Sun managed to avoid this kind of killing. Even the sky was not peaceful. From time to time, fierce birds passed by, each more terrible and fierce than the other. Lin Sun thought that after reaching the King realm, at least in the upper 9 realms, he would not be afraid of anything. But now he knew that his thinking was too simple. In the upper 9 realms, what was really terrible was not the enemy, but the omnipresent dangers and the unknown. However, although it was dangerous, Lin Sun got a lot of spiritual herbs of heaven and earth along the way, including some rare magical materials and king medicines. It was a reality of the saying that the greater the risk, the greater the gain. One day and one night had passed. Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder if he had entered a forbidden area and was completely lost since he hadn't walked out of this weird and dangerous woodland yet. At this moment, there was a rustling sound in the distance, mixed with some conversations. Suddenly, Lin Sun was refreshed, and his black eyes were bright. There was a sense of relief and joy. Chapter 1195. Lin Sun exhaled a long breath of turbid air, and then he couldn't help gritting his teeth. Just now, he had just experienced an extremely difficult battle against a group of strange, 6-winged blood mosquitoes. Each of them was as big as a fist, and their mouths were as sharp as blades. Their buzzing sound was like thunder, rumbling and shocking the soul. Moreover, these 6-winged blood mosquitoes appeared in groups. Not only were they extremely fast, but they could also spit out a kind of green poisonous flame. If one was bitten by it, his spirit would be devoured in an instant. It was really vicious and terrible. Even with Lin Sun's current combat power, he was still killed by this group of 6-winged blood mosquitoes. In the end, he had no choice but to escape. There were too many 6-winged blood mosquitoes, and it was impossible to kill them all. At this time, Lin Sun's whole body was scorched black, and there were many bloody holes on his body. He had lost most of his chi and blood. He was quite embarrassed. This was considered light. Since entering the distant fire realm for a day and a night, he had experienced at least a dozen similar dangers. Several times his life was hanging by a thread, and he was surrounded by danger. Lin Sun had enough of this damn place and was eager to leave. Therefore, when he noticed that there was a conversation in the distance, Lin Sun's excitement and joy could be imagined. Without hesitation, he approached there. Let's go back. This is the Styx forbidden area. Even sages don't dare to enter. It's too scary. In the dark, ancient forest, a white-robed woman was a little nervous. She was beautiful, and her eyebrows were like the moon. Her name was Rue Monroe. Beside her, there were 5 or 6 companions, all of whom were descendants of the Beast Mountain. The leader was a man in a wide robe and a wide belt. He looked arrogant and conceited. His name was Wu Lu Tao, who had become a king in the 3000 world. Hearing this, Wu Lu Tao thought for a moment and said, "What do you think?" He was also a little scared. The Styx Forbidden Area was one of the most terrible forbidden areas known in the distant Fire Realm. I think Senior Sister Rue is right. This place is too dangerous. Even if Demon God Lin appears in this area, I'm afraid he can't come out alive. The others nodded. They had been wandering in this area for nearly a month, and they didn't dare to go deeper. Even then, they frequently felt extremely terrified and horrified and it caused their minds to be on the verge of being unable to endure it. That damned demon god Lin. Why haven't we seen any traces of him until now? Could it be that he already had a premonition that we were looking for him, so he gave up on entering the upper 9 realms? Wu Lutao frowned. According to speculation, the cultivators who entered through the passageway to the burning immortal realm would definitely appear in the distant fire realm. But now nearly a month had passed, but no trace of Lin Sun had been found, which made people feel strange. In my opinion, he's either already dead or he doesn't dare to come. Right? Countless great powers are searching for his tracks in the distant fire realm now. So long as he dares to make an appearance, he's bound to be encircled and annihilated at the first possible moment. Speaking of Lin Sun, these men and women all showed undisguised hatred on their faces. Forget it. Let's return. The distant fire realm is not peaceful. It's completely different from the immortal burning realm. There are too many heirs of superpowers here. Wu Lutao made his decision. Although senior brother when Aohai has stepped into the Extinction King stage, with just him alone, he can only protect our myriad Bee-Spirit Mountain brothers from being bullied. So, we must increase our strength as soon as possible. When Aohai, as soon as the current divine son of myriad Bee-Spirit Mountain entered the distant fire realm, he coincidentally entered into a mysterious abode and obtained a heaven-defying fortune, allowing him to step foot into the Extinction King stage in one go. This was something that no one could have imagined before this, and it was like a miracle. During this period of almost a month, miracles like this had occurred repeatedly in practically every single area of the upper 9 realms. Those that succeeded appeared like bamboo shoots after the rain, and it caused a great stir and uproar. Most of them were ordinary king realm cultivators. Failures were common as well. In light cases, they were reduced to the half-step king realm, and in severe cases, their souls were directly obliterated. Amongst them, there was no lack of ancient freaks that were looked upon favorably by all, yet they failed to overcome the ultimate tribulation and were eliminated by the tribulation. The silence, forbearance, and waiting of the ages had all been in vain in the end. This was the struggle for the Grand Tao. If one couldn't see through life and death, then one couldn't overcome the tribulation. Wu Lutao and the others had seen numerous similar scenes, and from their initial shock, they'd already become accustomed to it now. Although there was a heaven-defying fortune in the upper 9 realms, not everyone could rise up casually. On the contrary, compared with the 3 realms, the upper 9 realms was more dangerous and the competition was more fierce. It was no exaggeration to say that death was happening all the time. Without any delay, Wu Lutao and the others turned around and retreated. The more they saw death and blood, the more they realized the value of life. The forbidden land of Styx was so horrible that they didn't have the mood to explore it. However, they didn't notice that a figure was following them in the dark. No wonder this damn place is so abnormal. It turns out to be a forbidden land that no one dares to go deep into. Lin Sun's lips twitched. From the conversation of Wu Lutao and the others, Lin Sun had already understood how dangerous the place he had been shuttling through for a day and a night was. He didn't know whether he should consider himself unlucky or feel lucky. 2 hours later, when Wu Lutao and the others walked out of the ancient dense forest, they couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, as if they had just walked out of the gate of hell. If it was possible, they really didn't want to come here again. At the same time, Lin Sun's eyes lit up. Outside the dense forest, the sky was bright, and there was a vast and gentle plain. The lush weeds were swaying in the wind, and the wind brought rich and pure spiritual energy, which made people feel relaxed and happy. Whoosh! Wu Lutao and the others rose into the air and flew away. Lin Sun didn't have time to think too much. He ran by Qi to cover his breath and followed them closely. The void was blue, and the clouds were like snow. Between heaven and earth, there were undulating mountains and rivers, a primitive and ancient atmosphere of wilderness. From time to time, figures could be seen crossing the void in the distance, shining brilliantly and disappearing in a flash. Occasionally, there were huge divine birds flying across the sky, spreading their wings like clouds in the sky, covering the sky. Wherever they passed, the void was chaotic and collapsed. On the earth, there were herds of beasts galloping, tigers roaring, and wolves howling. Each kind of creature was fierce, and their breath made people's hearts tremble. Eight-winged starbird, fire-tailed flying antelope, double-winged blood centipede, dim giant serpent, vigorous bear centipede. Lin Sun was surprised along the way, because the divine birds and fierce beasts he saw had long been extinct in the outside world, even in the ancient times. At the same time, Lin Sun clearly felt that the rules of the great way between heaven and earth were clearly visible, and there was surging vitality and dense spiritual energy in the void. It was no exaggeration to say that any random place for cultivation was comparable to the best blessed land in the outside world. If that was all, it was not magical and special. What really moved Lin Sun was that with the sense of qi, he could more intuitively, clearly, and easily perceive the traces of the Great Way. The Tao was extremely mysterious, and there were no traces to be found. Seeking the mysteries and seeking the way were the biggest problems that troubled countless practitioners. But in the mythical fire territory, one of the upper 9 realms, it was easy to experience. This was undoubtedly incredible. It's no wonder that all the top figures in the world want to enter the upper 9 realms and pin their hopes on breaking through and becoming kings. This place is really too magical, just like the legendary Pure Land of Miracles. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. He had a feeling that if he was able to grab hold of every single opportunity in the next 9 years, then his path towards the Tao was bound to advance by leaps and bounds. Here we are. In the distance, Wu Lutao and others showed a relaxed look. Lin Sun looked up and saw a spiritual mountain on the horizon in the distance. It was surrounded by clouds and mist, and the divine light fell like a waterfall. It was a sacred scene. The spiritual energy from all directions gathered on the mountain like thousands of streams returning to the origin, making it look like a pure land where the gods lived. Whoosh! When they arrived at the mountain, Wu Lutao and others floated down. There is no doubt that this was the place occupied by the descendants of the Beast spiritual mountain. It was a magical and extraordinary mountain, full of spirit and spirit. These guys really know how to enjoy life. It's hard not to make progress in cultivation here. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. In a mountain gate, a group of practitioners came out to greet Wu Lutao and others. Senior Brother Wu, who is this junior fellow apprentice? How could he be so seriously injured? Suddenly, someone noticed Lin Sun, who was following closely behind, and couldn't help but be stunned. Wu Lutao, Rue Monrong, and others were also stunned and couldn't help looking back. When they saw Lin Sun, they were also stunned. At this time, Lin Sun looked a little embarrassed. His body was scorched black. Although the wounds on his body had healed, the poison left by the 6-winged blood mosquito could not completely disappear in a short time. So at this time, these descendants of the Beast spiritual mountain couldn't recognize his identity for a while. Lin Sun ignored them and looked at the spiritual mountain in front of him with fiery eyes. When he got closer, he found that above the mountain, the spiritual energy was like a waterfall, which evolved into a strange scene of dragons and snakes coiling. In the cracks of the ancient rocks, ancient trees bloomed and bore fruit, and spiritual medicines and divine materials could be seen everywhere, filling the air with fragrance. In some places, there was golden spiritual light rushing out, crystal clear. Looking carefully, it was actually a spring gurgling with spiritual liquid. Even the soil on the ground was filled with an incomparably dense vitality. Good place, it's really a good place. Lin Sun's eyes became more and more fiery. Friend, who are you? Why did you come to the territory of the Beast spiritual mountain? Wu Lutao and others frowned. From the beginning to the end, they didn't notice how this guy, who looked like a beggar, followed them. The territory of the Beast spiritual mountain? Then I came to the right place. Lin Sun withdrew his gaze and smiled slightly, revealing his snow-white teeth. Everyone was stunned and couldn't help looking at Lin Sun carefully. What did this guy mean? From his tone, it was obvious that he came to find trouble. But he was injured to this extent. How dare he come to find trouble? This gave people a very strange feeling, as if they had heard a big joke. Chapter 1196. Demon Lin. These three words seemed to have magic power, causing everyone present to be shocked and their faces to change abruptly. The atmosphere suddenly became dead silent. Lin Sun glanced at the crowd and said, "Haven't you been looking for me? Now that I'm here, why don't you welcome me?" Wu Lutao and the others twitched their lips. Welcome? It was merciful not to kill him immediately. At this time, they finally recognized Lin Sun's identity, and their expressions changed from the initial shock to a strange one. No one expected that Demon Lin, who had been searching for nearly a month, would take the initiative to appear in such a manner. Was he tired of living? Ha ha! Many people couldn't help but laugh. The Demon Lin in front of them was almost unrecognizable and miserable like a beggar, but he still dared to come and provoke them. It was ridiculous no matter how they looked at it. I admit that this guy's courage is really boundless. He's injured like this, but he still came to provoke us. I can't help but admire him. Someone sneered. Wu Lutao and the other King Realm strongmen frowned and looked at Lin Sun. They felt something was wrong, but they couldn't tell what was wrong. Because Lin Sun's breath was completely restrained, and he looked miserable, they couldn't sense anything special about him. Lin Sun smiled and pointed to the spiritual mountain in front of him, saying, "From now on, this place belongs to me. If you don't want to die, submit to me obediently. In the future, mining, planting, serving tea, pouring water, and so on will all need manpower." The group of people were stunned, and they were furious in their hearts. This fellow was already injured to this extent, yet he still dared to boast so shamelessly and vainly wanted to occupy their territory. Demon Lin, you don't think this is still the world of immortals, do you? Rue Monrong said, wondering if Lin Sun was crazy. Lin Sun smiled. What's the difference? While talking, he had been sensing and found that the mountain was covered with 18 restrictions, which were very unusual. But that was all, far from being a threat. I'll kill you. A man couldn't hold back anymore. His face darkened, he shouted and spat out a mouthful of green light at Lin Sun. Clang! However, Lin Sun, who was covered in scars and scorched black, only needed to flick his fingers to shatter the attack. This was a green spirit saber that was refined from a rare beast bone. It was incomparably sharp, but now, with a crack, it was broken. Everyone was shocked, and their expressions changed slightly. I'm a man of my word. As long as you submit to me, I can spare your lives, Lin Sun said casually as he glanced at the crowd. This infuriated everyone. This fiend Celestial Lin was too arrogant. All of you step down. Let me do it. Wu Liotao's gaze was like lightning, while his entire body emanated the imposing aura of a king, and strands of extremely blazing light coiled around his body. Demon God Lin, back in the burning immortal realm, we couldn't do anything to you because you were hiding in the city. But now, you'd better kneel before me. Wu Lutao was very conceited. He grabbed Lin Sun's head from a distance. This strike blotted out the sky and erupted with dazzling light, and it fully revealed the elegant bearing of a King Realm expert. Everyone was in high spirits and looked at Lin Sun as if he was a dead man. Bang! However, Lin Sun stood there motionlessly, and the force of this grab collapsed halfway, turning into a rain of light that dispersed. Wu Liotao's pupils suddenly constricted as he finally realized the problem. But right at this moment, Lin Sun also made a move and pressed his palm down. Kneel first, then talk to me. Wu Lutao tried his best to resist this palm, but as soon as they collided, he couldn't bear it anymore, and blood sprayed from his mouth and nose. Then, with a plop, he knelt there, and a large pit was smashed out on the ground, causing smoke and dust to fill the air. Everyone was dumbfounded and almost jumped up in shock. Wu Lutao was a true king who had condensed the Tao Seed. Although he hadn't stepped into the peak of the King Realm, his combat strength was still strong enough to annihilate any existence below the King Realm. But now, he was forced to kneel by a slap. Lin Sun raised his eyebrows and said to himself, "It seems that ordinary king realm experts are too weak, and there's nothing worth paying attention to in the past." Although Lin Sun had confronted with king realm experts many times, he had never fought with them with his own strength. Now that he had stepped into the Extinction King realm, although he knew that his combat strength had changed dramatically, he didn't have a specific concept of how strong he was. Therefore, he was still a little cautious before and didn't neglect his attack. But now he finally understood that there was no need to pay attention to a character like Wu Lutao at all. They were both kings, but there was already a world of difference between them. Hearing this, Wu Lutao, who was kneeling on the ground, changed his face and roared, "Hurry up, let's attack together. He has become a king." Others had already noticed that something was wrong, so how could they neglect it? "So what? Who hasn't become a king yet?" A burly young man shouted, holding a black axe, and chopped at Lin Sun. He was like a barbarian king. With one blow, the wind and thunder surged and the void was chaotic. At the same time, several other King Realm experts also moved together and attacked Lin Sun. They were shocked that Lin Sun had become a king, but they were not afraid because they were also kings. Moreover, Lin Sun was covered with scars and scorched black. Obviously, he was seriously injured, so they didn't feel any burden when they attacked. Couldn't they deal with a seriously injured demon god Lin? Unfortunately, you know nothing about power. Lin Sun also made a move. His figure flashed and disappeared out of thin air. The King Realm stood proudly above the 5 realms of cultivation. In the past, it was enough to make any reincarnation developing realm tremble. Even Lin Sun almost died when he was besieged by Wu Yuanjin, Miao Xin, and the other 2, and he had no power to resist at all. But now, everything was different. In an instant, the burly young man with the giant axe was smashed away by Lin Sun's punch. His tendons and bones were broken, and he flew out and smashed hard on the mountain rock. The other King Realm experts shouted in surprise and fought with all their strength. Unfortunately, although they reacted fast, Lin Sun was faster than them. With 2 muffled sounds, 2 figures were sent flying. One's chest collapsed, and he fell on the ground. The other's neck was directly broken, and his spirit didn't have time to escape, and he died on the spot. How is this possible? The other King Realm experts were dumbfounded. After all, they were all King Realm experts, but now they seemed weak and vulnerable. Not to mention them, even those who hadn't become King Realm experts in the distance were trembling with shock. Their eyes were wide open, and they couldn't believe what had happened. Just now, they were still sneering at Lin Sun, thinking that he was courting death and was tired of living. In the end, such a thing happened, catching them off guard. They were all dumbfounded and shocked to the point that their souls almost flew out of their bodies. He has set foot in the Extinction King Realm. At this moment, Wu Lutao finally dared to conclude that demon god Lin, who looked badly injured, was not only a King Realm expert, but also a King Realm expert. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to have such terrifying combat strength. That was the only way to explain why the combat strength he was displaying right now was so powerful. Extinction King Realm? The others were stiff all over, and their souls almost left their bodies. In the burning immortal realm, when Demon God Lin was still at the reincarnation developing realm, he already had the combat strength to massacre all the major forces. Now that he had set foot in the Extinction King Realm, how terrifying would he be? Puff, puff, puff. While everyone was still in shock, Lin Sun had already killed 3 kings in a row. His casual attack was like a thunderbolt, with the power to destroy everything. It was unstoppable. "Quick, go and ask for help." Wu Lutao roared, his eyes red. Now he finally understood why Lin Sun dared to appear in such a manner. This guy was obviously here for revenge. Rue Monrong and the others fled in panic, rushing up the spiritual mountain. Puff! Behind them, Wu Lutao was also killed. His eyes bulged out, and he looked lost and unwilling even at the moment of his death. So what if he was in the King Realm? To Lin Sun, it was no different from killing chickens and dogs. Blood rained down, and the thick smell of blood permeated in front of the mountain gate. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and looked up the spiritual mountain. Around him, corpses were lying on the ground in disorder. It was a horrible sight. On the mountain, screams rang out, and there was chaos. "Quick, ask senior brother when Ao for help. Demon God Lin is here." Rui Monrong's hair was disheveled, and she looked terrified. Demon God Lin? The experts of the Thousand Beast Spirit Mountain were stunned. They had been searching for traces of Demon God Lin for a long time. Now that he had come to die, wasn't it a good thing? "Junior sister Rui, why are you so scared? It's just Demon God Lin. In the burning, immortal world, he could only hide in the city to survive. Now that he has come to the Upper Nine Realm, wouldn't it be easy to kill him?" A King Realm expert said disdainfully. He. Rui Monrong's teeth were trembling, and she was so anxious that she was sweating profusely. She couldn't even speak. What's wrong with him? Someone frowned. At this moment, they also sensed that something was wrong. Boom! At this moment, the mountain shook, and the restrictive formation covering the mountain began to buzz violently. It was on the verge of collapse. Not good. On a mountain, everyone was shocked. This was a king path restrictive formation. Even if a life and death realm king came, it would be difficult to shake it. If one entered it by mistake, he might even be killed on the spot. Boom! However, before everyone could react, a deafening rumble resounded, and the king path restrictive formation that covered the entire mountain exploded into pieces. Formation diagram after formation collapsed and transformed into a dazzling rain of spirit markings that covered the sky. At the same time, a figure walked out from the rain of light. His figure was tall and graceful, and his steps were calm, as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. Hiss! The sound of people gasping rose and fell on the mountain. All the disciples of the Thousand Beast Spirit Mountain felt their hearts tremble, and their expressions changed indeterminately. Indeed, he was shaken by it. A king path restrictive formation was destroyed so easily as if it didn't exist. This in itself was too terrifying. He has become a king of the apex. Right at this moment, Rui Monrong finally spoke these words, and she seemed to have exhausted all the strength in her body. As soon as she finished speaking, her entire body went limp as if her soul had left her body. The surroundings were deathly silent. Chapter 1197. Peerless King. Every word was like thunder. From Rui Monrong's frightened and distracted look to the formation of King Path that covered the mountain being easily broken. At this moment, when they heard the two words that were already legendary and shocking to begin with, a series of impacts surged out like a raging ocean, causing the experts of the Myriad Beast Spirit Mountain to be stunned and their hearts to tremble. The atmosphere also became dead silent, so oppressive that it was hard to breathe. Originally, some people were arrogant and disdainful of Lin Sun as a king's domain. Originally, when they heard that Lin Sun took the initiative to come to them, they were surprised. At this moment, they were like ducks that had their necks grabbed. Their eyes were wide open, and they looked as if they had been caught off guard. Lin Sun glanced at them and was attracted by a place on the cliff at the top of the mountain. There was an ancient tree with a trunk like a dragon and cracked old bark. Only a white-colored flower bud that seemed as if it was sculpted from ice was condensed on the bald branch, and it flowed with rays of light while emanating numerous illusory divine lights that carried a sweet fragrance that refreshed the mind. Lin Sun was amazed by just one glance. There was no doubt that this was a divine tree, and the flower bud on it was destined to be extraordinary. This is impossible. Hundreds of peerless kings' tribulations have appeared in the distant fire realm. Only a small number of people have passed and become the peerless king. Most of them have failed miserably and died with regret. Suddenly, someone said in a deep voice, but no matter whether they succeeded or failed, none of the peerless king's tribulations were triggered by demon God Lin. It was a young man in red. He looked furious and couldn't believe it. The crowd was restless and shocked. If he wasn't a peerless king, how could demon God Lin be so powerful? Lin Sun retracted his gaze and said with a smile, "What I said at the foot of the mountain still stands. As long as you surrender, we can avoid a lot of bloodshed here." As soon as he finished speaking, someone shouted angrily, wishful thinking. Bang! Lin Sun didn't move, but an ice dragon appeared under his feet and rose into the air. Its tail was like a divine whip, smashing the man's head and causing him to die on the spot. Blood splattered all over the ground. Screams rang out as everyone stirred. They were alarmed and afraid. Fiend Celestial Lin actually dared to kill so brazenly. He clearly thought nothing of them. Lin Sun, aren't you worried that my senior brother Wen Aohai will wipe you out when he returns? The scarlet-robed man's face was ashen, and his eyes were about to split open. Hearing this, Lin Sun was suddenly enlightened and said to himself, "No wonder only cats and dogs like you showed up in such a big noise. It turns out that Wen Aohai is not here." Cats and dogs? The successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain felt extremely humiliated and furious. Not satisfied? Then don't blame me for being ruthless, Lin Sun said indifferently. He was just about to attack when the vermilion-clothed man said, "Wait." After that, his expression was bitter and filled with unwillingness as he said in a low voice, "We are willing to submit. Senior Brother Meng." The others all had sorrowful expressions, finding this hard to accept. The scarlet-clothed man took a deep breath and said resolutely, "Let's do it this way." Everyone was unable to calm down. As the successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain, now they were coerced and suppressed to surrender. Who would be willing to accept this? This was absolutely a great shame. "Kneel down." Lin Sun's voice was calm. Just 2 words almost made the scarlet-clothed man lose his temper. Since they had already surrendered, did Demon Lin still want to humiliate them? "Demon Lin, you've gone too far." Someone couldn't hold back and shouted resentfully. Bang! Lin Sun waved his sleeve, and a ray of light swept out and erased the man, leaving no body behind. The man turned into ashes and scattered. "You." The others almost went mad. They were ashamed and resentful to the extreme, and they were terrified to the extreme. Lin Sun put his hands behind his back and glanced at the crowd coldly. "Since you've surrendered, you should behave. Don't think I don't know what you're planning. You just want to endure for a while and wait for Wen Aohai to come back to save you." As soon as these words came out, everyone's face turned pale, and they were silent. "I'll give you a chance. Wait here for Wen Aohai to come back." Lin Sun's voice was indifferent. "But before that, you'd better behave. Even if Wen Aohai comes back, I'm afraid he can't save you." Plop. In the end, the scarlet-clothed man knelt down first, his face ashen. Seeing this, the others' inner support seemed to collapse, and they also knelt down one after another. Lin Sun didn't mean to humiliate them. According to his original plan, he decided not to leave any trace of future trouble. But he was new here and was completely unfamiliar with the distant fire realm. He urgently needed to know all kinds of information, so he finally decided to let these people live. Moreover, when dealing with some trivial things, he could also order these people so that he could save more time for cultivation. Of course, Lin Sun couldn't stay here for a long time. When he left, he would naturally deal with these successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain. As for whether to kill or let go, it depended on their performance. Half a quarter later, Lin Sun had learned that this mountain was called Starnet. It was originally the territory of 8-winged Starnet, but later it was occupied by a group of strong practitioners of the myriad beast spiritual mountain led by Wen Aohai. This mountain was 3,900 jong tall. The mountain was precipitous, and it was extremely beautiful. It gathered spiritual energy from all directions. In the outside world, it could be called a rare, top-class, blessed place. But according to these successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain, in the distant fire realm, although similar blessed places could not be seen everywhere, there were definitely many. There were even some blessed places that were more beautiful and magical than Starnet, which were real miracles and pure lands. However, the number of such places was very small, and they had long been occupied by the super forces. Starnet Mountain was rich in a kind of magic material called divine gold, which was extremely precious and rare and had long been extinct in the outside world. After the successors of the myriad beast spiritual mountain occupied this place, they had been mining divine gold. At the same time, there was a natural fragmented metal spring on the mountain. The spring water flowing out was as crystal as pearls, purer than spiritual marrow, which could be used by strong practitioners in the king realm for cultivation. Besides that, there were numerous spirit herbs growing on Starnet Mountain, and there was no lack of precious treasures that had attained the king grade. In short, it was a blessed place that was difficult to encounter in the outside world, and occupying it was no different from obtaining a great fortune. However, what attracted Lin Sun the most was the divine tree on the side of the cliff at the top of the mountain. According to senior brother Wenauhai, this is a Starnet divine tree, and the flower buds that have condensed on it will bear Starnet fruits soon. Rue Monrone looked depressed, and she forced herself to explain. Simply speaking, this Starnet fruit is a real magic medicine. Magic medicine. It was like a peerless treasure that could give birth to its own spirit. In the outside world, a magic medicine was even more precious than a king's way extreme weapon, and it was extremely rare. Only those ancient orthodoxies could cultivate such a magic medicine, and there were very few of them. The greatest value of the divine medicine was that it could not only aid in cultivation and solidify one's cultivation, but it could also play an incredible role when a king realm expert was going through the longevity tribulation. Even if he was physically exhausted, seriously injured, and on the verge of death, so long as he swallowed a magic medicine, he could recover instantly, and it was no less than getting a new life. As for practitioners below the king realm, they were unable to absorb the power of magic medicine at all. Once they accidentally ate it, they would destroy their cultivation because they couldn't bear the medicine's efficacy. Lin Sun stood in front of the Starnet divine tree and stared at the snow-like flower bud on the treetop, and he was very tempted. This flower was the size of a fist, suffused with divine brilliance, and flowed with a gorgeous glow like ice and snow. Every petal was branded with profound and complicated Taoist markings, and it sprayed out a fragrance that intoxicated the soul. If one looked carefully, there seemed to be a little person sitting cross-legged in the stamen that was enveloped by the glow. The little person was motionless as if he was cultivating, and it actually gave people a sense of solemnity and holiness. This was the embryonic form of a spirit. When the flower bud matured and condensed into a fruit, it would give birth to a spirit. Moreover, according to Lin Sun's judgment, this Starnet fruit would mature in less than a month and be ready for picking. For Lin Sun, king medicine would become a necessity for his cultivation in the future, and magic medicine would be a luxury that could only be found by chance. There was a simple stone house built beside the Starnet divine tree. Lin Sun said thoughtfully, "This is the place where Wenauhai cultivates, right?" Rue Monroe nodded with an even gloomier expression. She was very uncomfortable and resistant in her heart, and she felt extremely humiliated, but she had to obey, which caused her to suffer a kind of torture in her heart. Lin Sun ignored her and pushed open the door of the stone house. Suddenly, an extremely dense rain of light rushed out of the house, and it vaguely evolved into the image of a coiling dragon and snake. What an amazing spiritual chi! Lin Sun's black eyes lit up. Only now did he realize that there was a mystery in this stone house. He walked in and found that the space was not large, but it was filled with dense spiritual chi that seemed to be substantial. Being in it was like being immersed in spring water. Through the spiritual mist, Lin Sun saw clearly that there was a strange light golden jade on the ground. It was as smooth as a mirror, and it seemed to contain an ocean within it, giving people a feeling of vastness and holiness. The rolling rain of spiritual chi was surging out from this light golden jade, ancestral source stone. Lin Sun could determine this item at a glance, and he couldn't help but be shocked. Spiritual veins gathered the spiritual chi of heaven and earth, and they were very common in the world. However, there were very few spiritual veins that could condense ancestral source stone. Only a primitive spiritual vein could give birth to such a magical item. The so-called primitive spiritual veins were spiritual veins that had been born since the world was born, and they had existed until now, accumulating the aura that had been accumulated for countless years. In the outside world, primitive spiritual veins didn't exist, but at least even some ancient orthodoxies didn't have them. This place will be my place of cultivation in the future. Lin Sun occupied this place without hesitation. Unfortunately, whether it was the primitive spiritual veins or the ancestral source stone, they couldn't be moved. Otherwise, Lin Sun would absolutely not mind taking them away. Rue Monrong's expression was uncertain, and she was extremely depressed in her heart. Not only had the star-net fruit been targeted, but even the ancestral source stone had been occupied. Chapter 1198. By the way, where did Wenauhai go? Lin Sun suddenly asked. Rue Monrong was startled, and then her heart shook. Was Demon Lin worried that senior brother Wenauhai would come back? It seemed that he wasn't completely fearless. Thinking of this, Rue Monrong took a deep breath and said, 2 days ago, senior brother Wen set off with the mythical fire battle tablet to take the test to enter the Qianjiao Golden List. Mythical fire battle tablet. Lin Sun had heard from Old Toad that there was a similar battle tablet in each of the upper 9 realms. Only by taking the test in front of the battle tablet could one be qualified to enter the Qianjiao Golden List. Can Extinction King Realm cultivators enter the Qianjiao Golden List? Lin Sun asked in surprise. According to his previous understanding, only the top figures in the reincarnation developing realm were qualified to compete and enter the Qianjiao Golden List. Rue Monrong's eyes flashed with imperceptible disdain when she heard Lin Sun's question. Demon Lin didn't even know this. But sadly, even if she was disdainful, she had to answer because of Lin Sun's despotic power. Before the arrival of the Absolute Domain, the Qianjiao Golden List only appeared a few times in ancient times. At that time, there was no Extinction King Realm cultivator. Therefore, only the top figures in the reincarnation developing realm could enter the Qianjiao Golden List. But it's different this time. It's an unprecedented era, and the Absolute Domain has become completely different. Now, the top figures in the upper 9 realms know that to enter the top 100 of the Qianjiao Golden List, one must have the strength of the Extinction King realm. Hearing Rue Monrong's explanation, Lin Sun finally understood. Rue Monrong left before long, and Lin Sun began to meditate. The day and night of adventure in the Styx Forbidden area had consumed a lot of his energy, and he still had the poison of the 6-winged blood mosquito in his body. Whoosh, sitting cross-legged on the pale, golden ancestral source stone, Lin Sun was acutely aware of the surging and pure spiritual energy rushing into his body like a great river. He could easily refine it without any hard work. Amazing, cultivating here for a day is equivalent to cultivating for a month. Lin Sun sighed with emotion in his heart. It was worthy of the upper 9 realms. If such a blessed place for cultivation was placed in the outside world, it would be enough to cause all orthodoxies to covet and fight for it. However, there was no lack of them in the distant fire realm. Hualala, soon, Lin Sun was drowned by the waterfall-like light rain of spiritual energy. He was like a big abyss, swallowing and cultivating crazily. Eventually, the entire stone hut began to emit strange rumbling sounds, like the rumbling of wind and thunder or the sound of Tao. The energy required to advance to the monarch realm was completely different from before. Just like now, the spiritual qi Lin Sun refined in one breath was equal to the power he refined in one day when he was in the reincarnation developing realm. Visible to the naked eye, Lin Sun's injuries and toxins were fading little by little and being repaired at an amazing speed. His entire person was faintly discernible in the rain of spiritual energy, holy and ethereal. If seen from the outside, the stone house where Lin Sun was located was like a huge whirlpool. As soon as the spiritual energy gathered from all directions, it would be swallowed up. Rumble. As the vortex revolved, a shocking rumble resounded, shaking one's soul. If one didn't witness it with their own eyes, it would be hard to imagine that this was caused by an expert cultivating. On the mountainside, a group of descendants of Beast Mountain gathered. Looking up at the top of the mountain, their faces were extremely gloomy, revealing resentment, unwillingness, humiliation, and anger. This was originally the territory of Beast Mountain, but now was occupied by demon god Lin, who forced them to submit and become slaves. How could they not hate him? Senior brother Meng. When will senior brother Wen Aohai return? Someone couldn't help asking. Others also looked at the man in red. His name was Meng Yinghua, and he had a high prestige. Hearing this, he thought for a moment and said, "It should be no more than half a month." Half a month? Everyone couldn't sit still. It doesn't seem to take so long to break through the Tianjiao Golden List, does it? Now that they all regarded Wen Aohai as their only savior, they naturally hoped that Wen Aohai could return as soon as possible. No. In addition to breaking through the Tianjiao Golden List, senior brother Wen has to visit several major forces to discuss an important matter. Meng Yinghua's eyes flashed. What important matter? Someone couldn't help asking. I can only tell you that this matter is related to a heaven-defying creation that has been sealed for thousands of years. If it can be done smoothly, the benefits will be too great. Speaking of this, Meng Yinghua's eyes became scorching. Following that, his expression turned cold and gloomy as he said, "Everyone, don't be anxious. Bear with it for a few days. The day senior brother, when Aohai returns from his mission, will be the day fiend god Lin perishes." Everyone nodded, and they were no longer depressed and desperate in their hearts. They knew that when Aohai would definitely return. At this moment, Lin Sun's indifferent and calm voice suddenly sounded. "Why are all of you gathered together? Didn't I tell you to dig into mines? If you dare to be lazy, I'm afraid you won't be able to see your senior brother Wen again." These words contained the profound meaning of Pu Lao's roar. As soon as it resounded, Meng Yinghua and others felt so uncomfortable that they almost coughed up blood and saw stars. Damn it! Everyone's face suddenly became extremely ugly, and they almost gnashed their teeth with hatred. Bear with it first, don't talk back to him. Meng Yinghua took a deep breath to appease everyone, and then he walked to the side of the mountain tunnel. Mining. In fact, it was to excavate the ores that contained divine gold in this mountain. However, these ores were extremely difficult to excavate. Even a king realm expert couldn't move these ores, and they could only use sharp weapons to excavate them bit by bit. Moreover, the distribution of divine gold was uneven. Sometimes the ores dug out after working hard for a long time might only be the size of sesame seed. To put it simply, it was a tough job. In the past, Meng Yinghua and others didn't feel it was hard to dig, but now it was different. They were enslaved, and even the treasures they dug out had to be handed over to Lin Sun, which was too aggrieved. If the dignified descendants of Beast Spirit Mountain were reduced to mining slaves, they would definitely be laughed at to death. Remember, if you dig less than half a kilogram of divine gold, then don't blame me for being rude. Lin Sun's voice sounded again, and it was so cold that Meng Yinghua and others almost coughed up blood with anger. Half a kilogram of divine gold? This was an unparalleled divine material, and they could burn incense to the gods if they could dig out a thumb-sized piece of it. Who dared to think about digging out half a kilogram? This was clearly forcing them to their deaths. Everyone, don't be impulsive. Bear with it for a while longer and let him be arrogant. Meng Yinghua quickly tried to calm him down. She was worried that the others would lose control of their emotions and do something inappropriate. Everyone took a deep breath and endured. The upper 9 realms consisted of 9 major realms. The distant fire realm was one of them. Apart from this, there were also the water ridge realm, the Qian heaven realm, the Kuan earth realm, the gentle wind realm, the Jin mountain realm, the reverse lake realm, the thunder shocking realm, and the extreme medium realm. Every realm was like a large world, and they were connected in the pattern of the 9 palaces. Among them, the medium extreme realm was the most special. It was also viewed as the divine pinnacle realm, meaning that it was a core area that was favored by the gods. Moreover, according to past practice, the medium paramount realm would open in 8 years. In other words, only in the 9th year of the descent of the absolute nothingness domain would the experts scattered throughout the other realms have the chance to enter the medium paramount realm. This also meant that the powerhouses who had entered the upper 9 realms from the 3,000 worlds were now distributed among the 8 great realms, excluding the medium extreme realm. This obviously showed how many experts and powers were gathered in every single realm, and the competition was bound to be extremely brutal. Wen Aohai was very clear about this. At this moment, he was standing before an enormous stone stele. The stone stele was ancient, and it towered into the sky like a pillar that held up the heavens. It was completely pitch black, and strange and warped mysterious totems were branded on it. Every single totem revealed a different scene. There were the sun, moon, mountains, rivers, flowers, birds, insects, fish, and even the boundless universe and the primordial times. All of them were suffused with an ancient, grand, and divine aura. As he stood before the stone stele, he was like an ant looking up into the sky, and he couldn't help but feel tiny. This was the distant fire battle stele. Every single realm had a similar battle stele. Only by passing through the test of the battle stele would one have a chance of ascending onto the Prodigy Gold rankings. At this moment, it wasn't just Wen Aohai. There were a few tens of figures standing near the distant fire battle stele. There were both men and women amongst them, and all of them possessed extremely powerful auras. As they stood there, they were like numerous overlords of the King realm. Even if he'd stepped foot into the extinct King realm, Wen Aohai had no choice but to restrain himself and keep a low profile. Because all the experts present here were existences that had stepped foot into the extinct King realm. The auras of some of them were even more formidable, and it caused Wen Aohai to feel indescribable pressure. It's only been less than a month, yet so many extinct King realm cultivators have appeared. Wen Aohai sighed in his heart, and he felt slightly heavy. What he saw before him was merely what he'd seen, and there were bound to be even more extinct King realm cultivators in other places. The Grand Era, this time, really is different from the past. Peak King realm cultivators that have never been born have appeared successively now, and it can be said to be unprecedented. Wen Aohai was originally very conceited, but now he was clearly aware that only by advancing into the extinct King realm would he possess the ability to fight in the upper 9 realms. If he wanted to slaughter a path of blood through the crowd of extinct King realm cultivators, then he had to improve his combat strength as soon as possible. On the other hand, the fastest way to improve his combat strength was to search for and seize the heaven-defying fortune that had been sealed for countless years. Besides this, there was no other way. Fellow Taoist one, please come over for a chat before we leave. Suddenly, a voice transmission resounded by his ears. Wen Aohai raised his head and looked over, and he saw a figure that was covered in bright gold standing nearby. The figure's entire body emanated a raging and domineering aura, and it was extremely conspicuous. The 9th prince of the Golden Crow bloodline, Wu Lingfeng. He was the younger brother of the 7th prince of the Golden Crow bloodline, Wu Lingfei. But Wu Lingfei had been killed by Lin Sun, and Wu Lingfeng was now an extinct King realm cultivator. Moreover, there were currently 4 great powers in the distant Fire realm, and they were like 4 overlords. Amongst them was the Golden Crow bloodline. Beside Wu Lingfeng stood a few men and women, and they were all extinct King realm cultivators from different powers. Wen Aohai's heart thumped, and he immediately nodded in agreement. He knew that what Wu Lingfeng wanted to talk about was absolutely related to the heaven-defying fortune that had been sealed for countless years. Chapter 1199. Not long after, Wen Aohai stepped forward to take the test. However, the result caused his heart to sink. There was no ranking. This meant that with his current combat strength, he couldn't be ranked in the top 100 of the Prodigy Gold rankings. Wen Aohai clenched his fists and took a deep breath to calm the unwillingness in his heart. He turned around and left the combat fire tablet. In the distance, Wu Lingfeng and the others were already waiting. Don't be discouraged. The competition in the upper 9 realms has just begun. A temporary ranking competition is nothing, said Wu Lingfeng. Wu Lingfeng said, furthermore, there are only a few experts who are able to enter the Prodigy Gold ranking. These people have already grasped the Grand Tao energy to the level of Tao laws, and have begun to seek the path to immortality. When Alhai was stunned, is it possible to be ranked on the Prodigy Gold rankings only by grasping the Tao laws? Not necessarily. Even if some extraordinary kings haven't grasped the Tao laws, they have a high chance of being ranked on the Prodigy Gold rankings. Wu Lingfeng said, "According to my knowledge, Qi Lingxiao was able to ascend to the 93rd position on the Heaven's Gold rankings in the Heaven's Heaven territory without grasping the energy of the Tao laws." 93rd. When Alhai's pupils suddenly constricted. This ranking seemed very low, but don't forget that in the upper 9 realms, there were many wonderful ancient freaks and heaven-defying geniuses. Being able to obtain such a name under the circumstances that he hadn't grasped the energy of the Tao laws could already be said to be world-shocking. More importantly, there were still many empty spots in the top 100 of the Prodigy Gold rankings that hadn't been occupied. Thinking of this, when Alhai felt much better. "Brother Wu, have you been ranked?" His heart shook as he looked at Wu Lingfeng. Wu Lingfeng smiled indifferently and said, "I just grasped a Tao law and am barely ranked 98th. His words were casual, but everyone could hear the arrogance in his voice. When the other king realms heard this, they couldn't help but reveal a wisp of imperceptible envy and fear. It was not easy to be ranked 98th. At least among the group of king realms. Wu Lingfeng was the first to do it. However, just as Wu Lingfeng had said, the upper 9 realms had only been open for less than a month, so the competition for rankings was nothing at all. In the following period of time, as the strength of every absolute monarch increased, it would be the time to truly compete for the Prodigy Gold list. Let's go. I invited all of you this time because of the heaven-defying fortune within the Nether River restricted area. If we're able to grasp it, then all of us will have the chance to charge into a higher position on the Genius Gold rankings." Wu Lingfeng's eyes revealed a hint of fanaticism. 3 days later, when Alhai left the residence of the Golden Crows and began his journey back, he was very excited. Under Wu Lingfeng's call, there were already 7 Extinction King realms like him who had unanimously decided to participate in the search for the heaven-defying fortune. The time was set to be 1 month later. 1 month is enough for me to raise my strength to another level. There's also the Starnet fruit. When the time comes, it will also ripen. With this godly medicine, even if we encounter fatal danger in the Styx Forbidden area, we can still save our lives. As he pondered, he could already see the outline of the Star Net Mountain in the distance. When Alhai suddenly thought that a month had passed, and the passage to the upper 9 realms had long been closed. At this time, Demon God Lin should have already arrived at the distant Fire Realm, right? Thinking of this, when Alhai's heart surged with uncontrollable killing intent. In the burning Immortal Realm, under the attack of Lin Sun, their Beast Spirit Mountain had suffered great losses. If not for this, there would only be more descendants entering the upper 9 realms this time. For example, the ancient freak Liang Shuing, who had died in Lin Sun's hands, and some of the absolute monarchs, all had hopes of reaching the absolute monarch realm. But now all of this was empty talk. If it wasn't for when Alhai stepping into the Extinction King realm by chance, the leaderless Beast Spirit Mountain was destined to be annexed by other forces. When Alhai knew that not only their Beast Spirit Mountain, but also the Golden Crow clan, the Sea Spirit clan, the Xuandu Taoism sect, the Moon-worshipping cult, and other forces were also searching for Lin Sun. As long as Lin Sun appeared, he was destined to become the target of public criticism. Star Mesh Mountain was very quiet, and nothing unusual could be seen. This made when Alhai, who had just returned, secretly heave a sigh of relief. The distant Fire Realm was not peaceful, and there were bloody conflicts every day. Fortunately, this Star Mesh Mountain was located in a remote place. Otherwise, it would have long been targeted by some other major forces. A series of clanking sounds came from the mountain. This made when Alhai's lips involuntarily curl up in a satisfied smile. During the time he left, his fellow disciples did not forget what he had told them, and they were all working hard to dig up divine gold. This was an extremely rare divine material that could be smelted into the best Imperial Path extreme weapon, and could even be used as an auxiliary material to refine holy treasures. without thinking too much, when Alhai walked in a mountain gate formation. But soon, he frowned and looked at the stone house at the top of the mountain. That was his place of cultivation, but now it was obvious that someone was cultivating in it. Immediately, he shook his head. There was ancestral source stone in the stone house, which was of great help to cultivation. It was not a big deal, even if it was borrowed by his fellow disciples. Senior Brother 1, you finally returned. Before a herb garden in the distance, Rue Monroe raised her head. When she saw Alhai's figure clearly, she was instantly excited to the point tears almost flowed out from her eyes, and she flashed over towards him. Alhai couldn't help but feel gratified in his heart. We've only been apart for a few days, yet junior sister Rue is already so excited. This obviously shows that I've become a queen, and I've already occupied an extremely important position in her heart. After all, Rue Monroe had never treated him like this before he'd become a king, let alone shed tears of joy. What? Senior Brother 1 has returned? Swish! A group of figures charged out from the tunnel in the distance. All of them had dirty faces, and they seemed extremely exhausted and in a slovenly state. But at this moment, when they saw Alhai, all of them were excited to the point their eyes turned red, and some even cried out with excitement and started dancing with joy. Such a scene caused Alhai to be moved, and he felt extremely moved and warm in his heart. Humans weren't plants, and they were all emotionless. How could he not sigh with emotion when he saw all his fellow disciples were actually so happy, excited, and happy upon seeing him? This is the treatment one can only enjoy after attaining the Death King realm, right? I must become even stronger. Alhai thought in his heart. In the past, when he hadn't become a king, he'd never enjoyed such treatment. He took a deep breath and asked, Senior and Junior Brothers, thank you for your hard work. May I know how much divine, wishful metal you've gathered now? The expressions of everyone instantly became unsightly, and some gnashed their teeth while some revealed expressions of sorrow and rage. Alhai was stunned and said, Could it be that something special has occurred? Right at this moment, Rue Monroe couldn't help but say anxiously, Senior Brother 1, all of this is a small matter. That fiend Godlin has already appeared. Before she could finish speaking, Alhai had already started roaring with laughter. Good. I was just worrying about how to kill this bastard. Yet I never imagined that he'd actually already appeared. His expression was filled with joy. His return this time was simply filled with good news. Not only did he receive the special treatment of all his fellow disciples, even Fiend Godlin had made an appearance. As they looked at Alhai, who was so overjoyed, Rue Monroe and the others weren't happy at all, and they were instead very anxious. Where's he? Quickly take me to look for him, so as to prevent him from escaping. Alhai had already asked, Rue Monroe pointed at the stone house at the peak of the mountain and said with a venomous expression, He's there. Alhai was stunned, and he almost thought that he had heard wrongly. He said in astonishment, Junior Sister Rue, are you mistaken? This was Star Mesh Mountain, the territory of their myriad beast spirit mountain. Moreover, that stone house at the peak of the mountain was his, Alhai's place of cultivation. How could that Fiend Godlin possibly appear there? That's right, Fiend Godlin is there. Meng Inghua rushed over, gnashed her teeth, and said with a face full of grief and indignation, Not only did he forcibly occupy your place of cultivation, Senior Brother, he even forced us to mine. All the Rui divine gold that we've mined these past few days has now fallen into that fellow's hands. What? Alhai's vision darkened, and the joy in his heart vanished without a trace. He suddenly realized that all the guesses he had made earlier seemed to be wrong. During the time he was away, Star Mesh Mountain wasn't peaceful at all. Besides that, the moment this Fiend Godlin arrived, he killed 8 of our fellow disciples and forcibly occupied Star Mesh Mountain. He even forced us to kneel and submit. Everyone's grief and indignation were filled with endless humiliation and hatred. As for Alhai, he felt as if he had been struck by lightning. How was this not peaceful? Even their lair had been forcibly occupied. An indescribable anger welled up in his heart, and he was so angry that his face turned green. He said, "How could this be? With the mountain guarding array, how could a small fry at the reincarnation developing realm like him do this? Don't you dare to stop him?" Rue Monrong said bitterly, "Senior Brother One, you've misunderstood. This fiend god Lin has already become the king of the pinnacle. The king of the pinnacle." As soon as these 4 words came out, when Aohai's head buzzed and his vision darkened. How was this possible? He finally understood that whether it was Rue Monrong or the other fellow disciples, they weren't welcoming his return at all. Instead, they were being persecuted and were waiting for him to rescue them. Perhaps this was called thinking too highly of himself. Embarrassment, shock, anger. All sorts of emotions surged into an Aohai's heart like a tsunami, making him want to cough up blood. It had only been a few days since he left. How could everything have changed? When Aohai's eyes turned red all of a sudden, and his hair stood on end, staring at the stone house at the top of the mountain, he couldn't help but roar, "Lin Sun, come out and accept your death." His voice was like a clap of thunder, shaking heaven and earth and causing the void to be in chaos. He was completely enraged, and his hatred was driving him crazy. What are you shouting for? If the spiritual herbs and herbs on the mountain are destroyed, you can't afford to pay for it. And you guys, what are you waiting for? Go back and dig. In the stone house, Lin Sun's figure slowly walked out. He had his hands behind his back, and with the posture of the owner of the mountain, he berated when Aohai and the others. When Aohai had the urge to vomit blood. This guy, he was going too far. Chapter 1200. After several days of cultivation, Lin Sun seemed to have been reborn. Not only his injuries were healed, but his foundation of kingship was further consolidated. At this moment, his figure was tall and elegant as he stood on the peak of the mountain. As he looked up, he was filled with an otherworldly aura, like a cloud in the sky. This was the benefit of the ancestral source stone. The spiritual chi in the distant fire realm was extremely rich. With the help of the ancestral source stone, a few days of cultivation was equivalent to several months of cultivation in the past. Demon Lin, you were about to die, but you still talk big. Don't you know how to write the word death? Meng Yinghua and others were furious. Now that when Aohai had returned, they found their backbone. The humiliation and hatred accumulated in their hearts for many days burst out at this moment. You let me down. Since you chose to surrender, you should have the consciousness of being slaves. But now, you go back on your words. Is it because I am too merciful? Lin Sun sighed softly. Merciful? Meng Yinghua and others gnashed their teeth with hatred. These days, they were forced to mine and suffered all kinds of humiliation. How could this be merciful? Demon Lin, do you dare to come up and fight with me? With a swoosh, when Aohai rose to the sky and stood proudly on the top of the clouds. His body was surging with monstrous killing intent, and his long hair was flying in the air. Suddenly, the wind and clouds changed, and the void was in disorder. The power of the king of Extinction Realm was fully revealed at this moment. Why not? Lin Sun stepped on an ice dragon and lifted him up into the sky. His tall and handsome figure stood in the sea of clouds like an unshakable mountain. Senior Brother One, you must kill this bastard. On the mountain, people shouted excitedly and looked at Lin Sun with resentment. Don't worry, I will make him die miserably. When Aohai took a deep breath while his expression was icy cold, and he spoke word by word while emanating killing intent that covered the heavens and the earth. Whoosh! In an instant, his figure disappeared. As fast as the wind, he came and went without a trace. Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly shrank, and he dodged subconsciously. Whoosh! A wisp of sharp wind blade flashed by, cutting off a strand of hair beside Lin Sun's ear. The void on one side was cut like a piece of silk, leaving a straight crack. What a fast speed! Lin Sun was surprised, but his fighting spirit burst out. This could be considered the first time he had fought an opponent of the same realm since he stepped into the Extinction King realm. Lin Sun was also looking forward to it. Could his opponents fight against him in this realm? Whoosh! 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 In the blink of an eye, the sky was filled with fierce and shapeless blades of wind. They were extraordinarily swift, like bolts of lightning, and they came and went without a trace. There were thousands upon thousands of them, and they seemed like violent gales that filled the world and swept through the sea of clouds. Horrifying cracks appeared in the sky and intersected with each other. The clouds in all directions were scattered like shredded paper. From the beginning until the end, they could only faintly see when Ao-Hai's figure flashed like a ghost, and it was utterly impossible to capture his figure. Not only was it fast, but it was also extremely sharp. Occasionally, a wind blade would sweep out and plow out a huge ravine that was so deep that it couldn't be seen and rocks would shatter. Being in it, Lin Sun suddenly felt like he was in a storm. The vast wilderness was full of sharp wind blades that could make ghosts and gods tremble. During this process, he kept dodging, trying to lock onto an Ao-Hai's figure. However, when Ao-Hai's speed was simply astonishing, his figure was fleeting and looming. In a trance, it seemed that his figure was everywhere in all directions. But when Lin Sun tried to capture them carefully, he found that they were just shadows, the way of modest wind. Wind was omnipresent and pervasive. When it was gentle, it could blow on the face unconsciously. When it was fierce, it could overturn mountains and seas and set off a storm that could destroy the world. Undoubtedly, this was when Ao-Hai's unique way of cultivation. What he sought was to be like the wind and disappear without a trace. Crack, crack. Even though Lin Sun tried his best to dodge, his clothes would still be scratched and torn. In the eyes of Meng Yinghua and others, they only felt that their eyes were not enough. They could only see the sky full of wind blades and when Ao-Hai's figure. Lin Sun seemed to be in a sea of wind blades. Although he moved, he was firmly besieged and unable to get out. This made them very excited, and they cheered for Ao-Hai. Awesome. It's really awesome. Seeing your brother Wind's way of modest wind is so unpredictable that it can make the world pale. I'm only worried that this fiend celestial Lin will be killed too easily. In the sky, when Ao-Hai was also laughing, Lin Sun, you are also the king of the top, but why is your realm so weak? Could it be that you haven't set foot in the top realm at all? Originally, he was still vigilant. After all, when Lin Sun was in the reincarnation developing realm, he already had the power to defeat his peers. He thought that after advancing to the king of Extinction Realm, Lin Sun's combat power would not be too bad. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun was so weak that he couldn't even lock his figure. Crack! A wind blade brushed past Lin Sun's neck dangerously. Just a little bit more, and Lin Sun's life would be in danger. But Lin Sun's expression was calm, and his black eyes were deep and indifferent. From the beginning to the end, he didn't fight back, and was occasionally scratched when dodging. He even had to admit that at least in terms of speed, when Ao-Hai did have an advantage that he could be proud of. Even he was slightly inferior to him. But this didn't mean that he was suppressed. At present, the reason why he kept dodging was nothing more than to see what was unusual about Ao-Hai's combat power. This was an attitude of examination and exploration. He regarded Ao-Hai as a research object to confirm his own way of cultivation. Too weak? In that case, why haven't you defeated me until now? Lin Sun sneered, without concealing his sarcasm. Suddenly, Meng Yinghua and others were stunned. Indeed, until now, although Lin Sun was trapped and looked embarrassed, he didn't suffer any real injury at all. This seemed a little wrong. At the same time, when Ao-Hai's expression stagnated, and then he sneered, "Really? Then I'll let you see what despair is." Boom! Before his voice died away, the wind blades in the sky suddenly roared. Suddenly, each wind blade turned into a storm. Thousands of storms emerged, tearing the void in all directions. It seemed that the world would be crushed and turned into nothingness. This was undoubtedly an extremely terrible blow. It was when Ao-Hai's trump card. Even looking at it from a distance, Meng Yinghua and others felt an indescribable horror. It was as if their souls were about to be torn apart, and their eyes felt a stinging pain. This made them sigh in amazement as they felt increasingly excited. How was he, Fiend Celestial Lin, to withstand this strike? He was bound to be torn into powder, right? Lin Sun's black eyes suddenly brightened. He took a deep breath and no longer hesitated. He suddenly stretched out his body and punched out. As soon as this punch appeared, the world suddenly collapsed like a canvas. Thousands of turbulence were swallowed up and integrated into the fist force. Indistinctly, there was a phenomenon of heaven and earth collapsing and the reversal of yin and yang. Bang! Storm after storm was forcefully broken by the fist force. The scattered light, rain, and turbulence were all annihilated. Not a single armor was left. This, Meng Yinghua and others who were excited suddenly stiffened and their faces changed. How could this be possible? Before, Demon Lin was still trapped like a turtle in a jar and had no power to fight back from beginning to end. But now, as soon as he attacked, it was so terrible. Oh no! When Aohai's heart suddenly twitched. His figure was erratic and completely broke out, as if he had turned into a storm that swept through the ages, extremely powerful. Bang! Lin Sun's punch was finally resolved. But this didn't bring any joy to Wen Aohai. On the contrary, he looked surprised and doubtful. He noticed that something was wrong. It seemed that Lin Sun had just begun to fight with him seriously, and he had never really paid attention to his attack before. Kill! When Aohai roared, and the light all over his body roared, like a hurricane flowing between the mountains and rivers of the universe. It was impossible to see his figure clearly, but Lin Sun no longer held back and began to fight back at this moment. The ice dragon rose into the air, raised its head, and roared. It wrapped around Lin Sun's body, making him look like a god riding a dragon. His whole body was flowing with light, shining like the sun. Earth-shaking fist force broke out. Each punch was invincible and engulfed everything, annihilating Zhou Su's power. The heavy storm was completely submerged by the terrible fist force like a piece of paper. Bang! Caught off guard, Wen Aohai's body was swept by a fist force. At that moment, he suspected that he had been severely hit by the hand of a devil. His body was in severe pain, and blood spurted from his mouth and nose. He was furious, and his face was livid. But before he could say anything, he had to dodge with all his strength and run his strength to the extreme. Even then, Wen Aohai still had a feeling of being powerless and being completely suppressed. Fist strikes that were capable of obliterating the world filled the surroundings, and they were fierce, overbearing, and capable of destroying everything. Bang! Bang! In just a moment, he had been hit by countless fist forces. His skin and flesh were torn, and his tendons and bones couldn't bear it. There were signs of cracking in many places, which made him cough blood frequently. Impossible! The faces of Meng Yinghua and the others completely changed. They were extremely shocked. At this moment, in their eyes, Wen Aohai was like a straw falling into a big abyss. The fist force from all directions was like a landslide and a tsunami, and he was about to be drowned. Everything seemed inconceivable. Before, Lin Sun was trapped. He couldn't fight back. How could everything change in the blink of an eye? Meng Yinghua and the others were dazed, and their hands and feet went cold. Did this mean that Lin Sun hadn't used his true strength at all? Impossible. We're both at the peak, so why is your combat strength so formidable? In the sky, Wen Aohai was already heavily injured. His hair was disheveled, his face swollen, and his entire body was branded with fist marks. But compared to this, what frightened him even more was that he actually felt an indescribable sense of powerlessness in front of Lin Sun, even though they were both at the peak. It was like Lin Sun was a towering mountain, and he was an ant shaking the mountain. He seemed very tiny and pale. Wen Aohai was completely unable to accept this. He'd thought that after stepping foot into the peak of the King Realm, he would at least possess sufficient resources to not fear any opponent, even if he couldn't look down upon his peers. Never had he imagined that he would be completely suppressed by demon god Lin. Swoosh! Without giving Wen Aohai a chance to catch his breath, Lin Sun had already charged over. His fist was like lightning, and he swung his arm. With a bang, Wen Aohai was smashed down from the sky. Like a meteorite, he smashed a huge pit in the ground, causing the ground to tremble and dust to fill the air. You think you're worthy of being called a peak. Lin Sun looked down from the sky, his voice indifferent. Chapter 1201. Do you deserve to be called the peerless king? The words were as plain as water, but clearly resounded in everyone's ears. Looking up, the figure high in the sky was like a floating cloud, aloof and ethereal with an independent demeanor. On the ground, when Ao Hai's figure was twitching in the big pit as if he had epilepsy, he managed to raise his head with difficulty, his cheeks already swollen and covered with dust. His eyes were full of resentment, and he hissed, "Demon God Lin, do you dare to wait for me to master the power of Tao Law and fight again?" Obviously, he was still unwilling and unable to accept the defeat. This was because these words were laughable in themselves. Defeat is defeat. If you admit it, I may look up to you. Unfortunately, you don't even have the courage to admit your failure. With such a temperament, if it wasn't for the great fortune you obtained, you are doomed to never set foot on the peerless king realm in this life. Lin Sun's words were casual, but every word was like a knife, stabbing into an Ao Hai's heart, making his cheeks twisted and ferocious. But immediately, he said dejectedly, "I admit defeat." Lin Sun said indifferently, "It's too late." When Ao Hai's face changed dramatically, and he cried anxiously, "As long as you let me go, I can give you enough compensation." Even ants wanted to live, not to mention that when Ao Hai had just set foot on the peerless king realm and had a bright future, how could he be willing to accept his fate? On Star Luo Mountain, Meng Yinghua and others looked pale. They were completely hit. When Ao Hai's fiasco undoubtedly broke all their hopes. With pity in his eyes, Lin Sun said, "If you die, your things will naturally be my trophies. Why should I compensate you?" When Ao Hai hurriedly said, "I have a great fortune that defies the heavens. If you let me go, perhaps I can tell you this secret." Lin Sun said, "Tell me about it." In the forbidden land of Styx, there is a dry river leading to the underground. Under the river, there is a relic sealed for thousands of years. In order to save his life, when Ao Hai didn't dare to hide anything, he poured out everything like a bamboo tube. According to reliable sources, this relic is suspected to be related to the origin of Styx and contains a great fortune. After a pause, he continued, "A month later, the power of the seal will be weakened to the extreme. I have already promised Wu Lingfeng, the 9th prince of Golden Crow Branch, to go there to seek opportunities." A strange light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. He remembered that when he just entered the distant fire realm, he was transmitted to the dangerous forbidden land of Styx. It was just that he didn't expect that such a headache-inducing place would actually hide such a heaven-defying fortune. Moreover, through an Ao Hai's explanation, Lin Sun learned that this operation was convened by Wu Lingfeng, the 9th prince of the Golden Crow bloodline, and all those who participated in the operation were at the Extinction King realm. Originally, Lin Sun wasn't interested in it at all. He knew very well how terrifying the Styx forbidden area was. However, when Lin Sun learned that there were descendants of Sea Soul Clan, Xuandu Taoism sect, moon-worshipping cult, and other forces participating in the action, Lin Sun was immediately tempted. He didn't forget the hatred he had with these forces in the world of burning immortals. Next, Lin Sun asked some more questions, and when Ao Hai answered them in detail, appearing to be very cooperative. "If you let me go this time, I can come forward. I can take you with me in this action." When Ao Hai's face was full of hope, and his eyebrows were full of begging. At this moment, Lin Sun smiled. He stared at Wen Ao Hai coldly and said, "Do you think I will believe you?" Without waiting for Wen Ao Hai to speak, Lin Sun continued, "If I'm not mistaken, you may do this to save your life, but you also want to kill me with a borrowed knife. At that time, you can secretly cooperate with Wu Lingfeng and others to deal with me. Or to put it simply, you can directly tell them my identity. Wu Lingfeng and others will definitely target me without hesitation. After all, even an idiot knows that Lin Sun is the one they want to kill most." When Ao Hai looked stiff and said anxiously, "I can swear to God that I have no such intention," Lin Sun smiled coldly and said, "Even if you don't have such intention now, it doesn't mean that you won't have it in the future. Bang! Before his voice died away, Lin Sun suddenly stepped on Wen Aohai's clenched left hand, which was badly mutilated and his bones were crushed into powder. Wen Aohai screamed in pain. At the same time, Lin Sun raised his hand and grabbed a sword from Wen Aohai's broken left hand. The spiritual sword, as thin as a hair, was extremely small and crystal clear. But looking carefully, this small sword was branded with at least 800 layers of dense prohibition power, which was extremely terrifying. What is this? Lin Sun looked at it with great interest. He could clearly feel that this sword was filled with a destructive force. Wen Aohai's face turned pale in an instant, and his eyes lost focus. It seemed that he didn't expect that such a hidden trump card would be discovered by Lin Sun in advance. This is a treasure I carry with me. It's not very precious. If you're interested, please accept it. He took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, "Forget it. A gentleman doesn't take what others like. This sword is back to you." As he spoke, Lin Sun shook his wrist, and the sword, like a slender streamer, suddenly shot out and pierced into Wen Aohai's sea of consciousness. In an instant, Wen Aohai went crazy and roared with resentment. "Demon Lin, you will die a horrible death." The next moment, his whole body stiffened and he died. Then, his whole body corroded and turned into pitch-black venom on the ground. The nearby ground was instantly dyed black, and a pungent stench and rotten smell drifted out. Just a sniff made Lin Sun's chest and abdomen upset and sick. He couldn't help but feel awestruck. What a vicious power! A Death King realm expert had been annihilated with such ease, and it was obvious how terrifying the energy contained within this sword was. If Wen Aohai had launched a surprise attack just now, the consequences would have been really hard to predict. On Star Luo Mountain, Meng Yinghua and others were completely stunned. Their hearts were like dead ashes, and all their thoughts were burning. A few days ago, they endured and surrendered, and the only hope in their hearts was pinned on Wen Aohai. But now, the only hope was shattered with Wen Aohai's death. Demon Lin, how would he deal with them? The more they thought about it, the more frightened and helpless they felt. What are you waiting for? Go and dig. Lin Sun's rebuke sounded in the distance. But for Meng Yinghua and others, this rebuke was more beautiful than the sound of a fairy, and they couldn't believe it. Was he going to let them go just like that? It wasn't until Lin Sun's figure disappeared from the stone house at the top of the mountain that Meng Yinghua and others finally dared to believe that all this was true. Demon Lin didn't kill them. Perhaps, since he became a peerless king, he has never taken us seriously. Meng Yinghua and others had complicated expressions. They didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. If you were provoked by an ant on the road, would you care? Now, Lin Sun's action gave Meng Yinghua and others a similar feeling. However, they could only be the ants. In the future, even if we survive, in the upper 9 realms where danger lurks everywhere and killing is everywhere, I'm afraid. Rue Monrong's voice was bitter. Afraid of what? Someone couldn't help asking. I'm afraid it'll be difficult for us to survive. Rue Monrong's voice deepened, and his expression dimmed. Everyone's hearts trembled, and they realized that with Wen Aohai's death, they had no one to rely on. In the distant Fire Realm, if they wanted to survive, they could either choose to submit and become the vassal of other forces, or they could have another peerless king among them. But regrettably, the peerless king realm wasn't a place anyone could casually step into. Actually, submitting to demon god Lin isn't a bad idea. At least, if there's danger, he'll be the first to bear the brunt, someone said softly after hesitating for a moment. These words were extremely heart-wrenching. Wen Aohai had just died, and they were already thinking of completely submitting to Lin Sun. This was no different from betrayal. But at this moment, everyone was a little moved. In the upper 9 realms, annexation between the major forces happened every day. In order to survive, it was just a temporary compromise. Nothing was unacceptable. Everyone, Meng Yinghua spoke, and everyone's eyes focused on him, wanting to see what kind of bright path he would point out to them. After a long time, he finally squeezed out 4 words, "Dig well." Everyone was stunned, and the atmosphere became strangely silent. Immediately, they breathed a long sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Yes, Digwell. Only in this way could they reflect their value in the eyes of demon god Lin. Without any hesitation, they immediately took action. If the big shots in the Beast Spirit Mountain outside knew all this, they would probably be so angry that they would vomit blood. Being able to enter the upper 9 realms had already proved that Meng Yinghua and the others were powerful and extraordinary, but now they had fallen to the point where they could only rely on mining to reflect their value. How sorrowful and unfortunate was this? Lin Sun didn't care about these trivial matters. A few days ago, the passageways leading from the 3 realms to the upper 9 realms had disappeared, but until now, Old Toad hadn't shown up. According to this guy's narcissistic and arrogant nature, if he had entered the upper 9 realms, he would have caused a lot of trouble. But until now, Lin Sun hadn't heard any news related to Old Toad. Was this guy also teleported to the forbidden land of Styx and trapped in it like me? Lin Sun frowned. There was also a Lu, who worried Lin Sun a little. Outside the stone house, the ice flower bud on the divine star tree would blossom and bear fruit in less than half a month. Lin Sun had decided to leave Star Luo Mountain and explore other areas of the distant fire realm when this divine medicine matured. One was to inquire about some information, and the other was to eliminate some old enemies such as the Golden Crow bloodline, the Sea Soul clan, the moon-worshipping cult, and so on. My top priority now is to reach the level of Tao laws as soon as possible. Lin Sun took a deep breath, sat cross-legged on the ancestral source stone, and began to meditate. Through the duel with Wen Aohai, Lin Sun realized that only the power of Tao laws could fully exert the power of the King's Realm. The King's Realm operated the Tao laws. P.S. For those who use the Zongheng novels app to read, please pay attention to the book comment section of the Circle. On the evening of the 19th, Goldfish will have a live text broadcast with everyone, and then a large number of customized gifts will be distributed. It could only be said that there were a lot of gifts. For those who didn't download the Zongheng Novels app, they could also download it to play. Just follow the Circle of Heavenly Sun's Battle. Chapter 1202. 10 days later, Lin Sun stood in front of the stone house and stared at the only flower bud hanging on the branch of the star tree. More than half of it had bloomed, flowing with divine brilliance like a river of stars, fragrant and clear Taoist patterns on the petals. Through the glow around the stamen, a little man could be vaguely seen sitting cross-legged, as if he was cultivating, and the sound of chanting could be heard. It was the first time that Lin Sun had seen a magic medicine since he started his cultivation. He increasingly felt that such a spiritual thing was extraordinary, as if it had a spirit. Tinkling sounds came from a mine in the distance. Lin Sun couldn't help laughing. Since Wen Aohai's death, Meng Yinghua and others had completely admitted their defeat and intended to surrender, so they worked very hard to dig. Up to now, Lin Sun had dug out nearly 10 kilograms of divine gold. In the outside world, it was enough to make sages drool. After all, divine gold was not only a rare material for refining supreme weapons, but also an auxiliary material for refining holy treasures. Its value is amazing. Without thinking much, Lin Sun walked back to the stone house. In these 10 days, he had reached the level of the Tao of water and was about to break through the Tao of fire. Lin Sun had been immersed in these 2 kinds of Tao for a long time, and with the help of the heart-controlling Tao, it was natural for him to break through. As for the Tao of True Dragon and the Tao of Star Obliteration, he made slow progress. These 2 kinds of Tao were more powerful and strange than the other, and more difficult to comprehend than ordinary Tao. However, Lin Sun was not in a hurry. Comprehending the Great Way was a process of grinding, so it was useless to be anxious. In a barren forest far away from Star Mountain, a group of figures appeared quietly. Senior Brother Li, that's Star Mesh Mountain, and it can be considered to be a small paradise in the distant fire domain. Based on its aura, there's surely a primeval spirit vein hidden beneath it, and it's extremely likely that true divine herbs are born within the mountain. A young man in black said with a hint of greed in his eyes. More than 10 days ago, I've already found out that the successor of Bee Spirit Mountain occupies this mountain, and there is only a terminating king named when Auhai in charge. It can be said that with the strength of our Inhuis sect, if we go all out, we can conquer this mountain. As soon as the black-clothed young man spoke, the gazes of everyone flickered, and they revealed a wisp of excitement. In the outside world, the Een Fire Sect's foundation was not inferior to the 10,000 Bee Spirit Mountain. But the awkward thing was that he still hadn't occupied a place to stay in the distant Fire Realm. The reason was extremely simple. There were over 100 minor paradise and 4 or 5 great paradise in the distant Fire Realm, but all of them had been occupied by various great powers a long time ago. This was especially true for the powers that occupied those great paradise. Every single one of them possessed terrifying reserves, and they had numerous Extinction King realm experts holding down the fort. If these descendants of the Een Fire sect wanted to establish themselves in the distant Fire Realm, they had to solve the problem of shelter as soon as possible. Otherwise, in the next 8 to 9 years, they were destined to fall behind the other forces. Have you investigated the news? At the side of the black-clothed young man was a thin man with a feminine appearance, fair skin, and a pair of slanted eyes. His voice was low and hoarse. Li Shangshui. He was a peak king of the Een Fire sect. Although he wasn't an ancient freak before he became a king, he was a famous giant. Senior Brother Li, don't worry. There won't be any mistakes. I can guarantee it with my life. The black-clothed youth swore solemnly. Since that's the case, then let's do it. Li Shangshui took a deep breath and said, Later, I'll take the lead and deal with Auhai. All of you deal with the other descendants of the myriad Bee Spirit Mountain. Remember, you must go all out and end the battle quickly. Everyone agreed loudly. In the next moment, they'd already flashed out and flashed towards Star Mesh Mountain. In the distant Fire Realm, similar bloody conflicts occurred every day. For the sake of seizing the Spirit Mountain and Paradise, the different powers from the ancient Desolation Realm started an intense battle. Bang! As soon as he arrived, Li Shangshui's figure flashed, and he withdrew a battle axe that flowed with silver light. He swung his hand and fiercely smashed it towards Star Mesh Mountain. Instantly, the restrictions that covered the mountain started to tremble violently. This bright silver battle axe was actually extremely powerful, and the power emitted far exceeded that of an ordinary king-rank treasure. Obviously, this was the King Path Extreme weapon that Li Shangshui had nurtured himself. Meng Yinghua and the others were alarmed and ran out of the mine. They looked shocked and bewildered. Who had the guts to attack Star Mesh Mountain? Then, they suddenly realized that the situation had changed. When Auhai was already dead, and they, the descendants of the myriad Bee Spirit Mountain, had long lost their leader. Now, they were all relying on Demon Godland. When Auhai, if you have the guts, come out and fight. In the distant void, Li Shangshui's voice was soft and feminine, but resounded between heaven and earth. Rumble, as he spoke, the bright silver battle axe continued to hack down, and the mountain protection formation exploded and shook. This caused Meng Yinghua and the others to be shocked and angry. They realized that this group of people had come to snatch their territory. If you don't come out, don't blame me for destroying this formation. But at that time, this Star Mesh Mountain will probably be stained with blood. Li Shangshui's attack was extremely fierce. Like a god, he controlled the battle axe and hacked down. His divine power made one's heart tremble. When Auhai isn't here, if you have anything to say, you might as well say it. At this moment, Lin Sun walked out of the stone house on the mountain peak. His black eyes were cold as he stared at Li Shangshui in the distance. He had not expected that someone would covet Star Mesh Mountain and take the initiative to attack. It could be said that disaster had fallen from the sky. He isn't here? Li Shangshui frowned and then smiled coldly. In that case, the heavens are really helping me. I'll give you a quick death. Get out of Star Mesh Mountain now, and I'll spare your lives. The other descendants of the Een Fire sect were also excited. This was definitely a heaven-sent opportunity. Meng Yinghua and the others looked at Lin Sun in unison. They looked pitiful, as if they were seeking protection. Of course, Lin Sun could not ignore it. Star Mesh Mountain was now his territory. How could he allow others to encroach on it? What's more, the divine medicine on the mountain peak was about to mature. At this critical juncture, no matter who came, Lin Sun would not allow anything to happen to Star Mesh Mountain. Buzz. Li Shangshui seemed very unscrupulous. He held the bright silver battle axe and planned to break the formation again. If you dare to move again, I'll chop you up. Lin Sun's black eyes became cold. These guys were really arrogant. They had come to snatch territory openly. This was completely an open robbery. Chop me up. Li Shangshui looked as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. He looked up and laughed. The descendants of the Enfire sect were also amused. Before they came, they had all inquired about when Aohai on Star Mesh Mountain. Now that when Aohai was not here, there were still people who dared to stand up and threaten him. They were really ignorant and pitiful. However, they did not realize that Meng Yinghua and the others, who were originally panicking, were now very calm. They looked at them with pity in their eyes. These idiots did not recognize that the person who spoke to them was Demon God Lin, who was famous for his ferocity. It was simply too pitiful. The two groups of people were secretly pitying each other. It was very subtle. Come, try chopping me up. Li Shangshui's eyes were full of ridicule, revealing a cruel and awe-inspiring expression. As an existence of the Extinction King realm, even people of the same generation did not dare to use such words to threaten him. But now, someone actually said such words. This made him feel extremely fresh. Boom! As he spoke, he threw his wrist fiercely. The silver battle axe was like a falling comet, wrapped in the terrifying power of the King realm as it smashed towards the mountain defense formation. However, halfway through, a slender white hand appeared and firmly grasped the silver battle axe, holding it in the palm of his hand. Li Shangshui was stunned, and his eyeballs almost popped out. This was a supreme weapon that he had painstakingly nurtured. The power it contained made even his heart tremble. But now, it was easily controlled by someone else. In an instant, the awe-inspiring smile on his face froze, and his hair stood on end. This scene happened extremely quickly. When Lin Sun grasped the silver battle axe, the Enfire sect's experts were still laughing. However, soon, like Li Shangshui, they could not laugh anymore. They looked as if they had been struck by lightning, as if they had seen a ghost. What was going on? The atmosphere suddenly became deathly silent. As for Meng Yinghua and the others, their expressions became more and more pitiful. They were all gloating. These idiots, didn't they see who their opponent was? Was that fiend god Lin someone that anyone could mock? You're at the Extinction King realm? Li Shangshui took a deep breath, his expression gloomy. You'll know when I chop you up. Lin Sun smiled slightly, but that smile was extremely cold, without a trace of emotion. Boom! He leaped up and completely exploded. Just a moment ago, he was still a young man with an otherworldly temperament. In the blink of an eye, he seemed to have transformed into a peerless demon god that looked down on everything. He had a mighty aura. Not good. Li Shangshui's expression completely changed. It was not that his eyesight was too bad, but that in his perception, he could not distinguish Lin Sun's true aura at all, causing him to make a mistake in his judgment. In addition, his fellow sect members had solemnly guaranteed that when Aohai was the only one on Star Luo Mountain who had stepped into the Extinction King realm. This caused him to subconsciously think that Lin Sun was just an ordinary person. Who would have thought that this wrong judgment would now draw out a ruthless person who had obviously stepped into the Extinction King realm? The battle erupted in an instant. There was no way to dodge it all. Although Li Shangshui was shocked, he did not panic. He displayed the standard of a peak King realm practitioner. He whistled through the air, the fire around him surging as he activated his combat strength to the extreme. However, in just a moment, he could not bear it and was completely suppressed by Lin Sun. His body was injured in many places and blood spurted out. And the one who injured him was the Imperial Way extreme weapon that he had personally nurtured. This caused Li Shangshui to be both shocked and furious. He did not dare believe his eyes. When did such a ruthless person appear among the peak king realm practitioners? The descendants of the Fire sect were all dumbfounded at this moment. Their bodies were trembling from shock, and their minds were in a daze. They did not expect that the attack on the mountain had just begun, and Li Shangshui would be firmly suppressed, showing signs of failure. This was too strange. It was like a dream. Chapter 1203. Puff! The silver axe flashed, and blood splattered everywhere. A broken arm flew across the sky. Li Shangshui screamed in pain and retreated quickly. His face was extremely pale. He was bathed in blood and looked at Lin Sun in disbelief, as if he was staring at a monster. His hair stood on end. Who are you? Li Shangshui's heart was in turmoil. They were both at the Extinction King realm, but he was completely suppressed. This made him a little confused. Meng Yinghua and the others suddenly thought of the dead when Ao Hai. At that time, when Ao Hai also had the same expression of disbelief. Swish! Lin Sun didn't answer at all. His figure flashed, and the silver axe swept up, dragging a dazzling silver light that was thousands of meters long. I admit defeat. Li Shangshui let out a strange cry and gave up without hesitation. Buzz! The strong wind was like a sharp blade, blowing his long hair backwards. The sharp blade of the axe was only 3 inches away from his forehead, glowing with Taoist light. Li Shangshui was sweating profusely, and his whole body was stiff. There is no doubt that if he admitted defeat a little later, he would definitely be chopped alive by his own silver axe. On the ground, the descendants of the Fire sect were all dumbfounded. Why are you afraid of death now? Lin Sun said with a faint smile. Li Shangshui swallowed hard and said bitterly, Your combat power is unparalleled. I was blind. Clang! Lin Sun turned his palm and stuffed the silver axe to him. Ignorance is not a crime. I'll spare you this time. Li Shangshui was stunned. He didn't expect Lin Sun to be so easy to talk to. It took him a long time to react. He couldn't help but show a look of shame. He bowed and said, Thank you for your magnanimity. If there is a chance, I will repay you for not killing me. His words were sonorous. Seeing this, Meng Yinghua and the others couldn't help feeling complicated. They were extremely afraid of Lin Sun, but at this moment, they felt a trace of admiration. Everyone said that demon god Lin was unscrupulous and ferocious. But if you really understood him, you would find that he was clear about gratitude and grudges. He only killed those who deserved to be killed, not a cruel butcher who killed innocent people. When Ao Hai was dead, but Meng Yinghua and the others were still alive. This was the best proof. Even his enemies, Meng Yinghua and the others, had to admit that demon god Lin had a unique charm. No one could criticize or attack his character. The successors of the Fire sect all heaved a sigh of relief. They were extremely glad that Li Shangshui had not been killed. There's no need for that. If you don't mind, you can stay on Star Luo Mountain, Lin Sun said casually. Li Shangshui's heart trembled and his expression changed greatly. What do you mean by this? Lin Sun knew that he had misunderstood. He couldn't help but sneer. If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have to resort to such tricks. Li Shangshui said blankly. Then I can't stay in Star Luo Mountain forever. You can choose to stay and cultivate here, said Lin Sun. Is there such a good thing? Li Shangshui and the other Fire sect experts widened their eyes and almost couldn't believe their ears. Of course, I won't let you live in this blessed land for free. There are divine wool gold ores in the mountains. Pay me 5 kilograms of it every day, Lin Sun said. When Li Shangshui and the others heard this, they felt much more at ease. This was right. If Lin Sun didn't ask for anything in return, they would be suspicious. Thank you, Your Excellency. Li Shangshui bowed again to express his gratitude from the bottom of his heart. Their Fire sect had yet to find a place to settle down and had long been anxious. Now that they could settle down on Star Luo Mountain in this way, they were overjoyed. By the way, may I know your name? Li Shangshui asked carefully. Lin Sun. After reporting his name, Lin Sun turned and returned to the stone house. The power of the truth of fire was on the verge of a breakthrough. If nothing went wrong, he would be able to grasp the truth of fire tomorrow. Lin Sun, he, he's demon god Lin. Li Shangshui was dumbfounded and gasped. The other successors of the Yin Fire sect were also stunned. After a long time, they recovered from the shock and sighed in their hearts. Losing to demon god Lin was acceptable from this day onwards. Another Yin Fire sect force appeared on Star Luo Mountain. Meng Yinghua and the others had no objections. On the contrary, with Lin Sun and Li Shangshui, two Extinction King realms, holding down the fort, it would undoubtedly make their situation safer. This was a good thing. Living in a blessed land on Spirit Mountain was equivalent to having a base of operations and a path of retreat. The successors of the Yin Fire sect would occasionally leave and head to other regions to search for opportunities. Meng Yinghua and the others were also tempted. Once they became familiar with the successors of the Yin Fire sect, they would also follow them out on missions. Lin Sun did not stop them. As long as they guaranteed to hand over a certain amount of divine gold every day, he did not have the mood to care about anything else. Time passed day by day. The distant fire realm was becoming more and more turbulent. Bloody conflicts broke out frequently. Some were fighting over famed mountains and blessed lands, while others were fighting over opportunities. Among the many orthodoxies, the weak were swallowed up, while the strong became increasingly powerful. Among them, there was no lack of battles between Extinction King realms. There were also news of Extinction King realms dying. In short, the distant fire realm was very chaotic. Cruel and bloody things happened every day. Even Star Luo Mountain was inevitably affected. Like the successors of the Yin Fire sect before, some major forces that did not have a dwelling place began to target Star Luo Mountain one after another. However, with Lin Sun in charge and Li Shangshui's protection, Star Luo Mountain had not been captured after repeated attacks. On the contrary, the successors of the major forces who attacked Star Luo Mountain suffered heavy losses one by one. If they were lucky, they would flee. If they were unlucky, they would be wiped out in one go. During this period of time, more than 5 Extinction King realms had died in Lin Sun's hands. Similarly, there were also forces like the Yin Fire sect who chose to surrender to Star Luo Mountain, but the treatment they received was a little worse than that of the Yin Fire sect. All this was because the Yin Fire sect had performed very well during this period of time. It cannot be said that they had made great contributions, but at least they had played a role in protecting Star Luo Mountain. In this way, they were completely tied to the same chariot as Lin Sun, and Lin Sun would not treat them badly. As for the new forces, Lin Sun also knew that they just wanted to find a backer. Even if the sky collapsed, at least Lin Sun would hold it up. In terms of loyalty, they were far inferior to the Beast Spirit Mountain and the Yin Fire sect. But Lin Sun didn't bother to pay attention to them. They were just using each other. They regarded him as a big umbrella that could shelter them from the wind and rain, and he would take advantage of them. Every day, he would collect some magic materials and king medicines from these forces. Up to now, the forces on Star Luo Mountain had become so powerful that the successors of ordinary forces did not dare to offend them at all. Moreover, with several battles, the news that Lin Sun was in charge of Star Luo Mountain began to spread in the distant fire realm, causing a lot of waves. Who could have imagined that Demon Lin would set foot on the peak of the King realm without saying a word? As early as when he was in the burning immortal realm, he swept through a city and massacred many great forces. Now, several Extinction King realms have been killed by him. It's so cruel that it makes people tremble. Fortunately, this demon has been staying in Star Luo Mountain and has not moved out. Otherwise, the distant fire realm will be even more chaotic. Similar discussions were taking place in different areas of the distant fire realm. It was impossible to hide it at all. Just a little inquiry was needed to know all kinds of things that Lin Sun had done after entering the distant fire realm. Star Luo Mountain. It was one of the famous Great Blessed Lands in the distant fire realm. As early as the Upper 9 realms opened, Star Luo Mountain was occupied by the Golden Crow clan, and no force could shake it until now. Ninth Prince, Demon Lin has shown up. On this day, a news came to Star Luo Mountain and was heard by Wu Lingfeng, the 9th Prince of Golden Crow clan, who was meditating. Has he finally shown up? golden flames surged in Wu Lingfeng's eyes, which were extremely frightening. However, when he learned what Lin Sun had done on Star Luo Mountain, Wu Lingfeng's face suddenly darkened and he fell into silence. Demon Lin had actually reached the Extinction King realm. This was something that Wu Lingfeng had never expected. Originally, according to his plan, he wanted to kill Lin Sun before he became a king. But obviously, things had changed, especially when he heard that when Ao Hai was killed by Lin Sun, Wu Lingfeng's heart was filled with an unspeakable sullenness. According to the plan, in another 3 days, he would go to the forbidden land of Styx with Ao Hai and other Extinction Kings to explore a great opportunity. Who would have thought that when Ao Hai was already dead? Ninth Prince, the Sea Soul Clan, Xuandu Daoist sect, moon-worshipping cult, and other forces have come to visit, saying that they want to discuss important matters with you. At this moment, another person came to report. I'll come right away. A divine light flashed in Jin Lingfeng's eyes, and he suddenly stood up and strode out of the cultivation ground. A magnificent palace was built on the mountainside. In the main hall, there were already 7 or 8 men and women waiting. Each of them had a powerful aura, and they emitted a heart-palpitating King's Tao aura. They were Extinction King realm experts from the various large factions. Everyone, Demon Lin has shown up. As soon as he walked into the main hall, Wu Lingfeng spoke. To his surprise, the crowd was not surprised. They only nodded and said, "We are here for this matter." In an instant, Wu Lingfeng understood that because of Demon Lin's appearance, the major forces could not sit still. His visit was probably to discuss how to deal with Fiend God Lin. As expected, in the next moment, everyone spoke at once. I wonder what kind of heaven-defying opportunity this little bastard obtained to rise to the Extinction King realm. Moreover, there are already several people of the same generation who died in his hands. Everyone knows that this kid is cruel and vicious, and he will seek revenge for the smallest grievance. If we do not take action, we will be attacked one by him. We came here to discuss how we should deal with this kid. Wu Lingfeng's eyes flickered as he listened quietly. After a long time, he took a deep breath, and his eyes flashed with determination. He said, "Fine, it won't be too late for us to head to the forbidden land of Styx after we kill this Demon Lin." Everyone nodded, and they all heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. Demon Lin's advancement to the Extinction King realm was enough to make anyone fearful. Now, there was reliable information that proved that several peak-level kings had died in his hands in this period of time. Who would not be wary and fearful of this?